On my flight to Scotland, my mom sent 31 texts telling me to cancel my $12,750 honeymoon and fly home to babysit my siblings, or be disowned. The text from my mother arrived on my phone screen at 6:41 a.m., while I was waiting in the customs queue at Heathrow Airport, and the first 3 words caused my knees to buckle. Emergency family gathering. I saw my wife Harper's expression as she read over my shoulder. I watched her countenance morph from drowsy satisfaction to anxiety about something more serious. Anger or recognition? We had been married precisely 21 hours. We'd spent the previous 9 months preparing our vacation to Scotland. We saved $12,750 to finance the Highlands, distilleries, and castle accommodations. And my mother's next message, which arrived before I could digest the first, said, "Your sister Madison fractured her leg. Someone has to babysit the kids. You must return home today," not, "Can you return home?" Not, "Is there any need?" As if I were an employee she could summon at any time. I'd been the oldest of 5 children for 29 years, but I'd been functioning as a third parent since the age of 10. That's when my mother returned to school for her master's degree in educational administration, which required evening classes 3 evenings a week and weekend study sessions that took up the entire Saturday. My father had a sports goods store, working retail hours on most weekends and during the Christmas season. Someone needed to monitor my younger siblings, Madison, who was 7 at the time. The twins Carter and Dylan were 5 years old, while baby Sienna was just 3. That person became me. I learned to make macaroni and cheese before I learned long division. I changed diapers while my pals played Little League. While my age group had sleepovers and went to the movies, I read bedtime stories and looked for monsters beneath mattresses. By the time I was 13, my responsibilities had shifted from basic childcare to effectively running the family. I went grocery shopping with a list my mother had set on the counter and cash she'd put in an envelope labeled food money. I made supper most evenings. Nothing extravagant, just spaghetti, tacos, and chicken nuggets, the type of food that a child could handle. I assisted with homework, managed sibling disagreements, and provided bandages and children's Tylenol. I remembered which youngster was allergic to strawberries and which one refused to eat their sandwich until it was chopped into triangles. My parents always commended me for being mature, reliable, and dependable. Teachers at school referred to me as an ancient soul. Neighbors believed I was wise beyond my age. No one ever questioned why a 13-year-old was performing the job of 2 adults, or why my parents appeared perfectly content to delegate their parenting responsibilities to their child. The practice remained unabated throughout middle and high school. I couldn't join the basketball team since practice lasted until 5:45 p.m., and someone had to collect the kids off the school bus at 3:05. Sienna had a dancing performance that night, and my parents had commitments they couldn't break. My mother had a meeting in Phoenix. My father had an inventory weekend at the store. I only attended one high school party since leaving the kids alone overnight was not an option, and my parents' notion of family time was for me to babysit while they went to dinner and watched a movie. I was admitted to Berkeley with a half scholarship, my ideal school, and my mother thought it was great but unrealistic. "We need you here," she replied, stirring her coffee at the kitchen table as if she were discussing the weather. "The children rely on you. Berkeley is really far away." So I went to stayed at home, traveled 35 minutes each way, worked part-time in a campus bookstore to save money, and returned home every afternoon to make sure the kids had food and got started on schoolwork. My mother had completed her master's degree by then and was working as a vice principal at the middle school, but her hours were never in line with the needs of the students. My father was still in the store, working weekends, and unreachable. At 23, I finished with a degree in civil engineering and was immediately hired by a mid-sized business that constructed municipal water systems. Good employment, fair compensation, and genuine career opportunities. I relocated to an apartment precisely 7 miles from my parents' house. 7 miles. That was the furthest I could psychologically rationalize going since someone had to be accessible for the kids. That's when I met Harper. She worked as a pediatric occupational therapist at the Children's Hospital. Sharp, humorous, and really insightful, which made me uneasy at first. We'd been dating for 4 weeks when she casually requested for Thai cuisine. "So, how frequently do your parents truly parent their own children?" The question hit like a blow. I had been telling her about postponing our dinner arrangements the night before since my mother asked me to keep the kids while she went to a retirement celebration. "They parent them," I explained defensively. "They're simply busy. It's easy for me to help." Harper had given me a long, probing gaze. You did not help out last night. You were a parent. There is a distinction. I did not have a response for it. Harper did not push at first, but just watched. I had to regularly cancel arrangements because my mother would call with some sort of emergency, which typically meant trouble. They saw me spend my weekends driving kids to soccer games and birthday celebrations while my parents attended their own social events. I saw my phone fill up with texts from my mother at all hours. Dylan needs poster board for an assignment due tomorrow. Can you pick up Sienna after gymnastics? I am running late. Carter left his trumpet at home. Can you bring it to the school? Always posed as queries but acting as mandates because if I answered no, I would forsake my siblings. I sincerely and strongly loved my siblings. They felt like my children in ways that were probably unhealthy but very genuine. When I proposed to Harper after 3 years of dating, she said yes right away, and then said seriously, "We need to talk about boundaries before we get married because I will not spend our marriage coming second to your parents' convenience." We spent months in premarital counseling with Dr. Elise Thornton, a licensed marriage and family therapist with 11 years of experience specializing in attachment and family systems. Dr. Thornton posed questions that made me sweat. When was the last time I said no to my parents? Never. Did I get paid for childcare? No. Have they ever thanked me? Not really. Did I recognize this as exploitation? The word hit me like a cold water. Exploitation. Not helpful. Not familial support. Exploitation. We set limits 5 months before the wedding. I informed my parents that I would no longer be available for regular childcare, but that I would be pleased to assist in true emergencies. Saturday soccer games and forgotten lunchboxes did not qualify. My mother sobbed real tears, rubbing her eyes with a tissue as if I had announced my death. "After everything we've done for you," she murmured, her voice cracking. "We reared you. We made a sacrifice for you. And now you are abandoning your family." The guilt trip was well executed, refined over years of experience. But Dr. Elise Thornton had prepared me for it. "You are not abandoning anyone," she had emphasized throughout our session. "You are creating age-appropriate boundaries. You are an adult son getting married, not an unpaid babysitter." My father's answer was colder and more caustic. "Okay," he responded when I described the new restrictions, "but don't expect us to bend over sideways if you need something someday." The connotation was apparent. The relationships in our family were transactional. I offered free work. They offered what exactly? Conditional affection and reluctant approbation. I tried not to think about it too much. The wedding occurred in April. A little ceremony with 85 guests at Harper's favorite botanical park. My parents came and smiled for photographs and made a toast about how delighted they were. My mother sobbed again during the ceremony, and I wanted to think it was genuine grief over her son's wedding, not performance art intended to make me feel bad. We scheduled the honeymoon for late August, when Harper's hospital schedule cleared and I could take time off work. Harper had dreamed of visiting Scotland since she was a child, fascinated with Outlander and ancient history. We had thoroughly investigated everything. Flights from LAX to London to Edinburgh, rental cars, small lodgings in the Highlands, distillery tours, and castles. We'd saved every cent by avoiding meals and entertainment, worked extra hours, and putting birthday and wedding gifts directly into the vacation fund. Total cost: $12,750 for 13 days. I told my parents about it 8 months in advance. 8 months. I gave them more than a half year to make alternate childcare arrangements, plan around my absence, and accept that my life did not revolve around their demands. My mother responded by nodding blankly and saying, "That's nice, honey," as if I'd told her I was considering trying a new coffee shop. There are no questions regarding the itinerary. There was little thrill about my first overseas vacation. There was no appreciation of how significant this was to me. Just little indifference, which should have been my first red flag. But I was stupid enough to assume that the limits we'd established were being followed, and that my parents had accepted that I was no longer their go-to childcare answer. Looking back, I can't believe I was that foolish. They'd spent 19 years teaching me to be accessible, to drop everything, and to put their wants ahead of my own. 5 months of treatment would not be enough to remove such brainwashing. The first signs of problems appeared 4 weeks before our trip. My mother called on a Sunday morning as Harper and I were preparing breakfast. "I need to talk to you about something," she stated in her serious administrator voice. Your father and I have received an invitation to a wedding in Portland on September 4th. We hoped you could watch the kids that weekend. September 4th fell right in the middle of our trip. We'd be in an essay to explore Loch Ness and see Urquhart Castle. I quickly responded, I can't. I will be in Scotland. I informed you about this some months ago. A long pause. So, couldn't you postpone? Only a few days. We simply cannot miss this wedding. It is your father's cousin's daughter, and it would be impolite not to go. The audacity was amazing. They preferred that I postpone rather than cancel, like that was more logical. My honeymoon so they could attend a wedding for someone I'd only met twice in my life. Mom, we paid $12,750 for this vacation. The flights alone cost $4,200, and they were non-refundable. The hotels have been booked and paid for. I am not postponing my honeymoon. Her voice changed, taking on the pain tone that had always caused me to collapse. I just assumed family would come first. I had no idea we were such a hassle now that you are married. There it was. The allegation. The manipulation. Family comes first. Which in her vocabulary implied that your demands are irrelevant. Only ours do. I remained firm, which was tougher than it should have been. I told you that you would need to hire a babysitter or find another option. Harper and I are traveling to Scotland as scheduled. She hung up without saying goodbye. The quiet treatment began, no calls, messages, or answers. When I tried to contact the children, it took 6 days. She eventually texted. We discovered someone, a neighbor's daughter. She is charging us $240 for the weekend. I hope you have a wonderful trip. The subtle antagonistic remark about the expense was typical, especially considering they frequently spent more than that on their own date evenings and weekend trips. They had money for social activities but despised paying for childcare. The calculation only worked if my effort was worth $0. We left LAX at 10:55 p.m. on August 28 for an overnight trip to London, with a connection in Edinburgh. I notified my parents the precise dates, emailed them our itinerary, and let them know we'd be unavailable at times owing to travel and bad mobile coverage in the Highlands. My mother replied with a stern fine via SMS. My father had not replied at all. The quiet treatment persisted, and it was actually a comfort. No guilt trips, no last-minute pleas, and no fabricated crises. Harper and I boarded the plane, exhausted and excited, cuddled up in our economy seats, and finally relaxed for the first time in weeks. The flight arrived at Heathrow at 3:52 p.m. On August 29th, it is London time. We had a 2-hour stopover before connecting to Edinburgh. Time to have some dreadful airport cuisine, stretch our legs, and attempt to remain awake despite the jet lag. I turned off airplane mode on my phone while we waited at the gate, partly out of habit. It took around 45 seconds to connect to the international network. Then it began to vibrate repeatedly. The notification noises were continual, causing other passengers to look over with angry faces. My gut fell before I even looked at the screen, because I knew. Of course. I knew. I received 31 messages, 16 from my mother, 9 from my father, 4 from my sister Madison, and 3 from family friends I seldom interacted with. All sent in the 9 hours we'd spent crossing the Atlantic. All are marked urgent, and they all scream catastrophe in that manner that makes your chest constrict, even though you know intellectually that it's most likely contrived drama. I opened my mother's texts first. They were time-stamped beginning at 7:48 a.m. Pacific time, which would have corresponded to when our plane was over Greenland. Madison shattered her leg this morning and tumbled down the stairs. She's currently in surgery. This is serious. So where are you? We need you home right now. Then I can't believe you aren't responding amid a family emergency. Then your sister may have died, leaving you unreachable. My hands became shaky. Madison was now 22 years old, living at home while completing her nursing degree at the public university, and she was still a member of the household I had helped nurture. A broken leg was severe, painful, and undoubtedly frightening, but surgery seemed excessive unless it was a complicated fracture or many fractures. I wanted to call right away, but we were still in the terminal. Announcements blare as people surge by. Harper read over my shoulder, her face turning pale. "Oh no," she gasped. "Is she okay?" I didn't know yet. We discovered a calm nook beside a closed business. I phoned my mother. She answered the first ring. Eventually she snapped. "No hello." There was no awareness that I had been on a plane for 9 hours with no cell connection, just fury. Where have you been? Her voice was tight and piercing, but not filled with despair. Not the voice of someone whose daughter had just had emergency surgery. We were on an aircraft, I explained, trying to remain cool. What happened? Is Madison all right? What sort of surgery? My mother sighed deeply and dramatically. She slipped down the basement stairs this morning while hauling clothes down. The doctor stated that she shattered her tibia in 3 places. They had to put a rod in. She'll be non-weight-bearing for at least 7 weeks, possibly 9. I dialed the hospital's number on my phone, ready to talk with someone directly. Okay, that's quite serious. I'm so sad she's going through that. Is she out of surgery? Can I speak to her? My mother gave a disappointed sound. She's in rehab and extremely drugged. She is not available for phone calls. Then came the punchline, the true reason for the hurried texts. We need you to come home. Someone needs to keep the kids while we take care of Madison. Your father and I cannot handle anything alone. You need to cut your trip short and return today. There it was. Not Madison is dying and would like to see you. We do not require family help during a medical crisis, but we do need to come home and babysit since we have more essential things to accomplish. Carter and Dylan were now 19 years old, having finished their sophomore year at State. Sienna was 17 years old and a senior in high school. They were not little children who need regular care. They were almost grown-ups themselves. Mom, the twins are 19. They're old enough to care for themselves and assist Sienna. I'm not sure why you want me to travel home from Scotland on the first day of my honeymoon to babysit youngsters. Long, scary quiet. I can't believe you've gotten so selfish. Your sister recently underwent surgery, and you're concerned about your trip. There was the word again. Our vacation, not honeymoon, made it feel frivolous, optional, and something I could skip without consequences. This isn't a vacation, I said, my voice rising despite my best attempts. This is my honeymoon. We saved for several months. We paid $12,750 for this vacation. The flights are non-refundable. We just arrived 5 hours ago. Madison is going to be okay. A fractured leg is horrible, but it is not life-threatening. And the kids are teens, not toddlers. They don't need me there. My mother's voice became frigid. If you don't come home, you shouldn't bother returning to this household. You've chosen a vacation above your sister, your siblings who rely on you, and this family, and I'll make certain that everyone understands who you've become. The danger hovered in the air, familiar and unpleasant. Emotional blackmail had always been her chosen weapon, developed over decades of experience. I hope Madison heals quickly, I murmured, my voice wavering slightly. We'll check in tomorrow, but we won't be home early. We just arrived. I hung up before she could reply. Harper was looking at me with big eyes. She threatened to disown you, she replied slowly, because we did not cancel our honeymoon to babysit teens. Put that way, it sounded absurd. It was wild, but it was also the same dynamic I'd been stuck in for 19 years. My wants were irrelevant. My limits did not matter. My existence wasn't important, except as a resource for my parents to abuse. We boarded the aircraft to Edinburgh. The short trip was meant to allow us to regain our breath, reorganize, and begin our genuine honeymoon. Instead, I spent time looking at my phone, watching texts accumulate. My father texted, "Your mother is distraught. Madison is asking for you. The children are afraid. This is what you chose." We arrived in Edinburgh at 9:05 p.m. local time. We picked up our rental car, a little Nissan hatchback with right-side steering, which made my American head hurt. We drove 45 minutes to our first hotel, a renovated Victorian mansion in the old town with uneven flooring and a fireplace in the room. It should have been amazing, the start of all we had planned. Instead, I perched on the side of the bed and dialed Madison's mobile phone, desperate to hear from her personally that she was okay, and that this was not the 5-alarm situation my mother had described. She responded on the 4th ring, her voice muzzy and distant. "Hey," she said. "Mom claimed you were not coming home." "I'm in Scotland," I explained gently. "I am on my honeymoon. I'm really sorry about your leg. That sounds really uncomfortable. How do you feel?" She was silent for a moment, and I could hear the beep of hospital equipment in the background. "It sucks. The surgery hurt, and the painkillers make me feel strange, but I'm fine." The doctor described it as a clean break. The hardware appears to be in good condition. "I'll be on crutches for a while." but I should recover well. Relief washed over me. Clean break. Good prognosis. Not the medical catastrophe my mother had predicted. So why is Mom claiming that this is a family emergency that requires me to fly home? I inquired carefully. Madison sighed. She's freaking out because someone needs to help me get around, and it appears she can't handle that, let alone managing the household where Carter and Dylan are adults and Sienna is 17. I'm not sure why she acts like they're 7 years old. There it was. The truth. Simple but infuriating. My mother did not wish to parent. She wanted me to come home and resume my role as an unpaid caregiver so she wouldn't have to deal with her daughter's injury. Maddie, I'm not flying home, I explained. I apologize, but I gave them 8 months' notice about this trip. They had time to plan. This is my honeymoon. I know, she said, sounding tired. I also told Mom about it. I told her the twins could help me and I didn't need you to fly home from Scotland, but she's all about family obligations and how you've changed since you married. It is exhausting. We talked for a few more minutes, and I reassured her that I loved her and wanted to hear about her recovery. She insisted that I enjoy my trip and ignore our mother's dramatics. When we hung up, I felt slightly better. My sister was not dying. She didn't need me there. This was a manufactured crisis, as Dr. Elise Thornton had warned me to expect. But the texts kept coming. My mother, my father, and extended family members whom my parents had clearly requested as reinforcements. My Aunt Marjorie, I can't believe you would abandon your family like this. What is wrong with you? My Uncle Raymond, your mother is crying. Come home and fix it. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly voiced their concerns about my selfishness, cruelty, and complete lack of family values. The psychological assault was relentless. Every day, dozens of messages repeat the same themes. Bad son, brother, selfish husband, and family destroyer. Harper was watching me spiral. We were supposed to tour Edinburgh Castle, walk the Royal Mile, and drink whiskey in cozy pubs. Instead, I was glued to my phone, reading accusations and guilt trips, and my anxiety increased with each notification. Harper took my phone from me on our third day in Scotland, after I had spent 2 hours in our hotel room responding to family texts rather than hiking through the Highlands as planned. This had to stop, she stated firmly. They are ruining our honeymoon. You are letting them ruin our honeymoon. We need assistance. We discovered Dr. Maren Whitaker, a family systems therapist based in Portland who also offers telehealth sessions, via an online directory. She had 16 years of experience focusing on emotional abuse, parentification, and toxic family dynamics. We scheduled an emergency video call for that afternoon, sitting in our hotel room overlooking Edinburgh, as Dr. Whitaker listened to me explain 19 years of exploitation and the current crisis. She did not interrupt, instead taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. She finally explained that what your parents had done was known as parentification. It is a type of emotional abuse in which parents inappropriately delegate adult responsibilities to their children. You have been exploited since the age of 10. You gave up your childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood to raise their children, and now they're escalating because you finally set a boundary. She spoke with clinical detachment, stating facts rather than passing judgment. The emergency they've created, in which you must cancel your honeymoon to care for teenagers who do not require intensive care, is a control tactic. They're seeing if you'll break and revert to old habits. Flying monkeys refers to a family-wide attack in which relatives are recruited to harass you. It is deliberate abuse. Hearing a licensed professional with credentials describe this as abuse changed something in my brain. It wasn't just Harper being overprotective or me being overly sensitive. This was real, documented clinical abuse. Dr. Whitaker assigned me homework: document everything, every text, voicemail, and guilt trip. She requested dates, times, and exact wording. If your parents escalate further, she warned, you may require legal representation. I want you to have evidence. I assumed she was being paranoid. I didn't realize how right she was. We spent 5 days in Edinburgh before driving north into the Highlands as planned. The scenery was breathtaking: rolling green hills, ancient castles perched on cliffs, lochs as clear as glass. We visited Stirling Castle, drove through Glencoe, and stopped at small distilleries that produced single malt whiskey and copper stills. It should have been perfect, but my phone was constantly buzzing, sometimes with 60 messages per day. My mother's texts ranged from hurtful to aggressive to openly threatening. You're destroying the family. Everyone knows what you did. There will be consequences for this betrayal. On September 4th, 5 days into our trip, my mother sent a text that made my blood freeze. Because you have abandoned your responsibilities, we are filing a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services. The twins and Sienna are being neglected because you are not present to care for them properly. Enjoy Scotland while you can. I showed it to Harper, my hands shaking. Can she do that? I asked. Can she report me to the APS for not babysitting? Harper, who had spent years practicing pediatric medicine and dealing with bureaucratic nightmares, appeared skeptical. Adult Protective Services are for elderly or disabled adults who are abused or neglected. Your siblings are teenagers with no custody arrangements. I don't believe there is any mechanism for that complaint to stick. Dr. Whitaker was more direct in an emergency session held that evening from our hotel in Annecy. Your mother is bluffing, she stated flatly. She's attempting to scare you into returning home, but she's also creating a paper trail that could backfire spectacularly because she's effectively documenting that she can't parent her own children without the unpaid labor of her adult son. That will not look good if any agency actually investigates. She was correct about the bluff. No one from Adult Protective Services ever called, but the threat had been made, and it lingered in my stomach like poison. 3 days later, on September 7th, I received a call from an unknown Oregon number. I answered wearily, expecting a telemarketer or the wrong number. Instead, a professional male voice asked, "Is this Logan Pierce?" I confirm. "This is Troy Haldane with Child Protective Services. I'm calling because we received a concerning report about minors in your household." My brain stuttered at the words, "minors household." "I'm sorry," I said. "I have no minors in my household. I am on my honeymoon in Scotland." "Are you certain you have the right person?" Troy Haldane sounded puzzled. "The report identifies you as the primary caregiver for 3 minor siblings, Carter, Dylan and Sienna Pierce. It states that you abruptly stopped caring for the children without making alternative arrangements, putting them in danger." The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. "My mother filed that report," I stated, "and she lied. Carter and Dylan are 19 years old. They are adults. Sienna is 17, but she is with our parents, who are her legal guardians. I am their 29-year-old brother. I have no custody, guardianship, or legal responsibility over any of them. I am on my honeymoon with my wife." There was a prolonged pause. "Could you describe your relationship with your siblings and your role in the household?" Troy asked cautiously. So I told him everything. The parentification that began at the age of 10, the 19 years of unpaid childcare, the boundaries I set before getting married, the honeymoon we had planned for months, my mother's insistence that I cancel everything to babysit teenagers who did not require intensive care, and the escalating harassment and threats. Troy listened without interruption, and I could hear him typing notes. After I finished, he said something that changed everything. "Mr. Pierce, I want to be very clear about something. The report we received was filed by your mother. In an attempt to make you appear neglectful, she has made several concerning admissions about her own parenting." He explained that CPS would perform a home evaluation within 72 hours. They would interview the children, assess living conditions, and determine whether adequate care was being provided. "For the record," Troy stated, "you are not in any legal trouble. You're an adult sibling without a custody arrangement. Your mother's claim that you abandoned minor children is factually incorrect. 2 are adults, and 1 is in her legal custody, but her admission that she cannot adequately care for her children without your constant presence is deeply concerning." We hung up. I immediately contacted Dr. Maren Whitaker again. "CPS is investigating my parents," I said, "and they are still processing it because my mother attempted to report me for not babysitting." Dr. Whitaker was quiet for a moment before saying something that will stay with me. "Logan, if CPS finds problems, it is because they exist. Not because you failed to conceal them, but because your parents have been neglecting their children while using you as a cover. You've been so effective for so long that the system never noticed what was really going on beneath the surface." She was correct. I'd been the band-aid on a wound that would never heal. And now that I had pulled away, the infection was visible. CPS conducted a home visit on September 9th. I was not there. I was in a small hotel in the Highlands near Loch Ness, attempting to enjoy a distillery tour while my stomach churned with anxiety. Troy Haldane called me later with his findings. "Mr. Pierce, I wanted to give you an update personally. We made an unannounced home visit this morning at 9:40 a.m. We identified several areas of concern." He listed them in the careful, clinical manner that social workers use. The house was disorganized and dirty, with dishes stacked in the sink, overflowing laundry, and little fresh food in the refrigerator. Dylan answered the door because his parents were still sleeping at 9:40 a.m. on a Thursday. Sienna had missed 4 days of school that week with no documented reason or parental contact. Troy went on to say, "We interviewed each minor child individually. They all stated that you had previously been in charge of most household management, child care, and emotional support. They described feeling confused and overwhelmed by your absence because they were unsure how to handle basic tasks that your parents had never taught them. The 19-year-olds reported being expected to fill your role while receiving no guidance or support. Your 17-year-old sister expressed feeling abandoned by both you and your parents." His voice softened slightly. "To be clear, she stated that she understands you're on your honeymoon and believes your mother is being ridiculous, but she feels abandoned by your parents, who appear unable or unwilling to engage in parenting now that you're not there to manage everything." Troy stated that CPS was opening a case. "My parents would have to complete a parenting capacity assessment, attend mandatory family counseling, and show that they could meet their children's basic needs without relying on their adult son. If they do not comply, or if Sienna's situation deteriorates after the twins move out, as they have stated they intend to do, we will need to consider alternative placement for her." The weight of it settled on me. My absence revealed such profound parental inadequacy that the state stepped in, and my mother had caused it by attempting to weaponize CPS against me. My parents' calls stopped after the CPS visit. The silence was eerie and unsettling, but the flying monkeys increased. Family members I barely knew were calling Harper's workplace, attempting to have her fired for corrupting me and destroying our family. Someone wrote on my firm's Facebook page that I was an abusive brother who had abandoned his disabled sister. My mother had apparently launched a full-fledged public relations campaign, telling everyone who listened that I'd refused to help during a medical emergency, that I'd called CPS on them out of spite, and that I was a monster who prioritized money and vacations over family. The lies were so prevalent and confidently delivered that some people believed them. Dr. Whitaker predicted this. "When you stop enabling dysfunction, the dysfunctional people will rewrite history and paint you as the villain," she had warned. "Because admitting that they are the problem would necessitate self-reflection and change, which they are incapable of. It is easier to blame you." I knew she was correct intellectually, but reading messages from cousins and aunts calling me evil, seeing my name dragged through the mud on social media, and having my reputation shredded by people who didn't know the truth, hurt in ways I wasn't expecting. On September 11th, 5 days before our scheduled flight home, I received an email from an attorney named Daniel Cross of Cross Family Law Group. The subject line read, "Legal consultation of Pierce family harassment case." He stated that he specialized in family law, specifically parental alienation, exploitation, and harassment. Dr. Whitaker had referred him to me because he believed I might need legal representation due to my parents' escalating behavior. "I've reviewed the documentation Dr. Whitaker forwarded with your permission," he said. "You have a compelling case for harassment, defamation, and possible parental exploitation. I'd like to discuss your options during a free consultation." We had that consultation at a pub in a small Highland village. Harper and I huddled around my phone at a corner table as Daniel Cross explained our legal options in simple, straightforward language. "Bottom line," he stated, "your parents have no legal right to your time, money, or labor. You are not responsible for their children. You never were. Any suggestion that you have a legal obligation to provide childcare is completely false." He explained that the defamation, which involved telling people I was abusive, neglectful, and cruel, could potentially be actionable if it harmed my professional reputation, though those cases were difficult to prove. The harassment campaign through third parties, which involved family members flooding my phone and contacting my workplace, could support a restraining order. "I recommend documenting everything, which you already do," Daniel said. "Every message, call, and social media post. If you want to pursue a cease and desist letter, I can write one. It would formally notify your parents to stop contacting you directly, or through intermediaries, making false statements about you, and leaving you alone. It is not legally enforceable like a restraining order, but it establishes a paper trail and demonstrates your seriousness. When most people realize there are actual legal consequences, they usually back down." Harper and I decided to have the letter drafted, We decided whether to send it after we returned home and could assess the situation face to face. But just having an attorney, someone with legal expertise on our side, made me feel less powerless against the onslaught. We ended our honeymoon. We visited more castles, drank more whiskey, and hiked through breathtaking landscapes that did not seem real. But every moment was clouded by my phone buzzing with abuse, the knowledge that my family was imploding while I was an ocean away, and the creeping guilt that perhaps I should have just returned home. We flew back on September 12th, landing in Los Angeles at 6:33 p.m. After 14 hours in the air, I turned off my phone's airplane mode and braced for the usual avalanche. Instead, I received a single message from an unknown number. "Hello, it's Carter. I got a burner phone so Mom can't monitor this. Can we please talk?" I called him from the baggage claim. He responded immediately, his voice tight and strained. "Are you back?" he asked. I said, "Just landed." "What's happening? Are you okay?" Carter remained quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice crackled. "Mom and Dad are informing everyone that you called CPS to destroy the family. They claim you made everything up to punish them. Aunt Marjorie and Uncle Raymond were here yesterday, and it was like an intervention about what a terrible person you've become." He paused. "Dylan and I know we've been trying to stay together since you left, and it's been a nightmare. Mom barely functions. Dad works before zoning out in front of the television. Sienna is struggling, and no one is helping her. The CPS lady was here, and she should have come years ago. But Mom is acting as if you orchestrated this." "I didn't call CPS," I explained carefully. "Mom called them herself, attempting to get me into trouble. However, when they investigated, they discovered real problems. That is not my fault, Carter. That is on Mom and Dad for failing to parent without my help." He made a sound that could have been either a laugh or a sob. "I understand. Dylan knows. We are not stupid. We've been witnessing this dysfunction our entire lives. You leaving has made it impossible to ignore, and we're done. Dylan and I are moving into an apartment together in 6 weeks. We have already signed the lease. We can't do it anymore." His voice was full of relief, guilt, and exhaustion. My 19-year-old brother sounded like he had aged a decade in 2 weeks. "I'm sorry you're stuck with this," I said, meaning it. "But you're making the right decision. You cannot give up your life to parent your parents. They must figure it out themselves." We talked for another 25 minutes. Me and the twin I'd helped raise, whom I'd taught to ride a bike, assisted with math homework, and counseled through breakups. He talked to me about the apartment, his plans, and his fear of leaving Sienna behind. I assured him that Sienna would be fine, that CPS was monitoring the situation, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you love is to let the system work. The next day, Harper and I met with Daniel Cross at his downtown Portland office. He was older than I expected, possibly in his early 60s, with gray hair and the calm professionalism that would have cost clients a lot of money. We sat in his conference room and reviewed everything: the texts, the voicemails, the social media attacks, the CPS report, the fake emergency, the harassment campaign. Daniel took detailed notes, occasionally asking questions. When we were finished, he sat back and folded his hands. "This is one of the clearest cases of parental exploitation and subsequent retaliation I've encountered." He said, "You have extensive documentation. Dr. Whitaker's assessment provides expert validation. The CPS investigation corroborates your account. If your parents attempt any legal action against you, which they won't because they'd lose immediately, we can shut it down instantly." "Can they actually sue me for anything?" I asked, because at this point I didn't know what was possible. Daniel shook his head. "They could file a frivolous lawsuit. Sure, anyone can sue anyone, but they have no standing. You have no legal obligation to provide childcare for siblings. The concept doesn't exist in law. If anything, you'd have stronger grounds to sue them. 19 years of unpaid labor, lost educational opportunities, emotional damages. I don't recommend that route because family litigation is expensive and traumatic, but you'd have a viable case." He slid a document across the table. "This is the cease and desist letter. If you authorize it, I'll have it delivered tomorrow." The letter was formal and unambiguous. My parents were to cease all direct contact with me or Harper. Stop recruiting third parties to contact or harass us. Stop making false statements about us to family members or on social media. And cease all attempts to hold me responsible for childcare or financial support of my siblings. Failure to comply would result in legal action, including restraining orders and potential defamation suits. It was harsh. It felt necessary. Harper and I signed the authorization. Daniel promised to handle delivery and follow-up. Fair warning, he said as we left. People like your parents tend to either back down completely or escalate dramatically when served legal papers. There's rarely middle ground. Be prepared for either response. The cease and desist letter was delivered on September 18 at 3:12 p.m. According to the courier's tracking, my mother called 22 minutes later. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail that was 3 minutes of hysteria, screaming, crying, accusations so garbled I could only catch fragments. Ungrateful lawyer destroying the family. Never forgive. My father called next. When I answered, his voice was cold and distant. So this is what we've come to? You're threatening us with lawyers because we asked for help with your own family. The reframing was masterful. Demanding I cancel my honeymoon had become asking for help. And 19 years of exploitation had vanished entirely from the narrative. Dad, you didn't ask for help. You demanded I cancel my honeymoon to babysit teenagers. When I said no, Mom faked a medical emergency severity, weaponized my siblings against me, recruited extended family to harass us, and then accidentally got CPS called on herself. That's not asking for help. That's abuse. Long silence. Then if that's your perspective, I don't think we have anything more to discuss. He hung up. That was the last direct contact I had with either parent. The flying monkeys persisted for a few more weeks, but Daniel sent cease and desist letters to the most aggressive ones, and the messages gradually stopped. My parents had apparently decided that complete estrangement was preferable to accountability or change. The CPS case continued for 5 months. Troy Haldane updated me periodically. My parents had completed 2 parenting assessments. Both scored poorly on measures of emotional availability, child engagement, and understanding of developmental needs. They attended 4 sessions of mandatory family counseling, then stopped showing up, claiming the therapist was biased and didn't understand their family. The house conditions had improved marginally, mostly because Carter and Dylan had been doing cleaning and cooking before they moved out. Sienna was back in school consistently, but her grades had dropped, and she'd told her school counselor she felt emotionally neglected at home. The issue is that your parents are barely meeting minimum standards, Troy explained in one call. They're not abusive in ways that would justify immediate removal, but they are profoundly inadequate parents. Your sister essentially parents herself, gets herself to school, makes her own meals, manages her own schedule. Your parents provide a house and financial support, but almost no emotional engagement or practical guidance. He sounded frustrated. Unfortunately, inadequate parenting isn't usually grounds for removal unless it causes demonstrable harm, but we're monitoring closely, especially now that the twins have moved out and your sister has lost her buffer. In January, 4 months after we'd returned from Scotland, Carter called me with news. Madison is moving out, he said. She found a job at a hospital in Seattle, and she's transferring to finish her nursing degree up there. She's leaving in February. My first thought was relief that Madison was getting out, followed immediately by worry about Sienna. What about Sienna? I asked. Carter was quiet. She's counting down the days until she turns 18 in May. She's already been accepted to state, and she's planning to live in the dorms. 5 months and she's out. She just has to survive until then. Survive. The word hit hard. My baby sister, the 3-year-old I'd helped raise, now having to survive in her own parents' house until she could legally escape. Is she safe? I asked. Carter sighed. Physically, yeah, but emotionally? Mom and Dad barely talk to her. They're like roommates who ignore her. She eats dinner alone in her room most nights. When CPS came to check on things last month, she told them everything was fine because she's so close to aging out that she doesn't want to risk getting put in foster care. She'd rather be lonely than in the system. It made sense, but it broke my heart. In March, I got a call from Sienna herself. We hadn't talked much since I'd been back. A few short texts, nothing substantial. But now, she called, her voice small and uncertain. Hey, she said. I wanted to tell you something before you heard it from someone else. I got into state. Full-ride academic scholarship. I'm moving into the dorms in August. Pride flooded through me, mixed with relief. Sienna, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. A full ride is amazing. She laughed, but it sounded sad. I basically raised myself this year. Did all my college apps alone, Wrote my essays alone. Figured out financial aid alone. Mom and Dad didn't help with any of it. They didn't even ask. We talked for over an hour, my sister and I, about her plans and her fears and her hope for a future where she didn't have to parent herself. She told me she'd been in therapy through her school counselor, working through the realization that our parents' neglect wasn't normal or acceptable. She said she understood why I'd left, why I'd set boundaries, why I couldn't keep sacrificing my life for their dysfunction. I don't blame you, she said quietly. I'm going to do the same thing once I'm out. I'm going to build my own life, and they can figure out how to function without using their kids as unpaid labor. The CPS case closed in May, right before Sienna's 18th birthday. Troy called to let me know. We're closing the case since all the children are now adults, he said. For what it's worth, I want you to know that you didn't cause this situation. Your parents did. You just stopped enabling them to hide their inadequacy. Your siblings are all going to be okay. They're smart, resilient, and getting out. That's the best outcome we could have hoped for. He paused. And Mr. Pierce, what you did? Setting boundaries, protecting your marriage, refusing to sacrifice yourself. That took real courage. Your siblings learned from watching you that it's possible to choose yourself. That's a gift. My parents still haven't spoken to me. It's been 20 months since the honeymoon, since the boundary that broke our family. I've seen them 4 times in that period. 3 times at a distance at family events where we stayed on opposite sides of the room. Twice at the grocery store where my mother literally turned her cart around and left when she saw me. They look older, smaller, diminished somehow. My mother's hair has gone almost completely gray. My father has developed a stoop. They look like ordinary aging people who made catastrophic choices and paid devastating prices. Sometimes I feel sorry for them. Mostly I feel nothing. Madison is thriving in Seattle. Carter and Dylan share an apartment and are doing well at State. Sienna moved into the dorms in August and calls me regularly with updates about classes, friends, her newfound independence. She told me recently that she barely talks to our parents. They call occasionally, but the conversations are stilted and brief. They don't know how to relate to me as a person. She said they only knew how to relate to me as someone they could use. Now that I'm not available for that, we have nothing. It's sad, but it's also reality. Harper and I just celebrated our 3rd anniversary. We took a long weekend to Cannon Beach, stayed at a small inn, walked on the shore, ate fresh seafood, and actually relaxed. No emergencies, no guilt trips, no manufactured crises. It was quiet and simple and exactly what our honeymoon should have been. On our anniversary night, watching the sunset over the Pacific, Harper asked if I regretted how everything had played out. You lost your parents essentially, she said softly. That's not nothing. Do you wish you'd handled it differently? I thought about it. Really thought about it. About Carter's exhausted voice talking about surviving our parents' house. About Sienna doing her college applications alone. About 19 years of my life spent parenting children who weren't mine. About the honeymoon my mother tried to steal. No, I finally said. I don't regret it. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my parents chose control and pride over relationship. I regret that my siblings got hurt. But I don't regret protecting our marriage and choosing our life together. Because if I'd given in, if I'd flown home from Scotland and resumed my role, it never would have stopped. They would have owned me forever. Harper squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she said. I know that might sound condescending, but I mean it. You chose yourself. You chose us. And you gave your siblings permission to do the same. We sat in silence, watching the sun sink into the ocean, and I felt something I hadn't felt since before the honeymoon. Peace. Real, deep, uncomplicated peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of freedom. Freedom from obligation, exploitation, and the crushing burden of other people's refusal to mature. Sienna sent me a letter 2 weeks ago. Not a text or email, but a real handwritten letter in the mail. Dear Logan, it began. I've been thinking a lot about what happened to Mom and Dad during the honeymoon. I was confused and angry at first. But now I get it. You were not abandoning us. You showed us that it is possible to set boundaries. Watching you stand up to them. Choosing your own life despite everyone accusing you of being selfish. That taught me something I needed to know. That my worth does not depend on how useful I am to others. That I am free to want things for myself. Thank you for that. I hope you and Harper are happy. You deserve to be happy after everything you've given up for us. Love, Sienna. I called her in the evening. We discussed school, her psychology major, and her future plans to work with children from dysfunctional families. She sounded light, unburdened, and free in ways she had never done growing up. At the end of the call, she said, "Hi Logan, I am so glad you went to Scotland. I am glad you did not let them ruin your honeymoon. You deserved the trip." My throat tightened. You deserve to choose yourself. Thank you, Sienna. That means a lot. We hung up. I sat in our living room in the house Harper and I purchased last year, and I realized that this quiet evening with my wife, this freedom to build our own life, the absence of constant crisis and manipulation, was worth every painful consequence. My parents expected me to cancel my honeymoon to look after my siblings. When I refused, they attempted to destroy me, staged emergencies, weaponized my siblings, recruited flying monkeys, threatened legal action, and accidentally imposed CPS on themselves. They lost custody of their children's emotional well-being, lost relationships with all of their children except through formal politeness, lost their reputation in our extended family, lost their oldest son permanently, and, according to relatives I still speak with, they continue to blame me for everything, telling anyone who will listen that I am a vindictive monster who destroyed our family out of selfishness. Perhaps some people believe them. I don't care anymore because I know what actually happened. Therapy notes, CPS reports, legal files, and my siblings' testimonies all bear witness to this. The truth is devastatingly simple. I wasn't supposed to be their parent. I was supposed to be their son, brother, and family member, with proper boundaries and mutual respect. When I finally stopped being their unpaid servant, the dysfunction they had created through my exploitation collapsed. That is not my failure. That is theirs. And I am free. Finally, complete and permanent freedom. At my parents' 41st anniversary, my sister-in-law suddenly stood up, accused me of stealing, until I laughed and asked the restaurant owner to step forward. My gut still clenches when I recall that night. It was my parents' 40th anniversary, a lovely celebration of nearly 4 decades of love. But then my sister-in-law Brielle made an accusation so horrible and startling that it destroyed the whole room. She pointed at me, her eyes flaming, and said that I had taken her pocketbook. But, unbeknownst to her, I had predicted everything. The expression on everyone's faces when the truth eventually came out was priceless. You see, in order to really comprehend what happened that night, you must first understand Brielle. Since my brother Nathan brought her to our family 7 years ago, she's been on a never-ending drive to become the queen bee. She belongs to a wealthy family. Her father runs a chain of premium vehicle dealerships. And trust me, she will never forget that. I tried to be honest with her at first. I really wanted Nathan to be happy. And if Brielle was his option, I was determined to make things work. I asked her to lunch, recommended shopping trips, and even volunteered to help them plan their wedding. But every time, Brielle found a subtle, sneaky method to bring me down. She'd scoff at my basic flat, ask whether my clothing were from a bargain store, or say that my graphic design work was adorable, but not as significant as her job or her father's enterprise. It was exhausting. The most violent attacks were typically carried out at family gatherings. I recall 4 Christmases ago she accidentally spilled red wine all over a dress I had spent weeks designing and sewing herself. Then, the Thanksgiving before last, she publicly declared that it was so brave of me to come to dinner alone again, as if I were some miserable spinster. At my niece Mia's baptism, she had the audacity to tell her extended family that my baby present was kind given your financial situation. I gulped it down and smiled through tight teeth. Not for her, never for her, but for Nathan, who appeared oblivious to his wife's actions. And for my lovely niece, Mia. She's still so innocent and lovely, and the notion of producing turmoil that may harm her made me stay mute for years. My parents, Richard and Elaine, are in their early 70s. They're traditional peacekeepers who feel that family unity is worth virtually any cost. My father was a high school principal for 33 years, and my mother is a nurse. They instilled in us the value of forgiveness and treasured family relationships. When Brielle's actions became too blatant, they would just change the subject or attempt to separate us. It was aggravating, but I recognized their nature. Nathan, my older brother by 3 years, was often stuck in the midst. We were quite close growing up. He defended me from bullies and taught me to ride a bicycle. He was my confidant throughout my adolescence. However, after Brielle, he transformed. He grew aloof, canceling our weekly sibling dinners and inventing excuses. When I ventured to gently bring up Brielle's treatment, he'd become defensive, accusing me of envy or being oversensitive. She simply has a distinct communication style. Tess, he'd say, you need to try harder to understand her. My own brother dismissed my sentiments. That hurt. My younger sister Holly was my sole genuine ally. Holly, 2 years my junior, was the family's rebel, expressing her mind regardless of the repercussions. She saw right through Brielle and didn't hesitate to call her out, making her Brielle's second favorite target. To be honest, Holly was considerably less concerned about the jabs than I was. Do you know what your problem is? Holly once told me while rolling her eyes. You still care what the witch thinks. Stop, give her power. Easier said than done when every family gathering seemed like a psychological battleground. Let me tell you, the preparations for that infamous meal began 4 months ago. My parents announced their 41st anniversary, a significant milestone that warranted something absolutely spectacular. I offered to plan a supper at Salvatore's, their favorite Italian restaurant, and where they had their first date. I poured my heart into it. Custom meals, a selection of relevant songs, inviting their oldest friends, making a presentation of family images, and even generating stunning custom invites. Naturally, Brielle had to interject herself. First, she contacted the restaurant behind my back to reschedule our reservation time. Then she phoned my invited guests and suggested an alternative dress code. She even purchased a completely different cake than the one I had painstakingly chosen based on my parents' preferred tastes, saying hers was more sophisticated. When I approached her, she acted innocent. Oh, I thought we were planning this together. Nathan added. You probably needed help since you have so little experience with this kind of upscale event. My brother denied saying anything like that, but he also refused to urge Brielle to back off. So I adjusted. I compromised. I just focused on making the evening ideal for my parents. By the time the day arrived, I was fatigued from dealing with her interference, but I was determined not to let her spoil it. Salvatore's was a quaint restaurant nestled in Chicago's Little Italy. Marco, the owner's son, assisted me in reserving their most romantic corner table and duplicating the first date meal. The private dining space was illuminated with warm amber light. Red and white flowers decorated each table. I came 90 minutes early to personally lay framed images of my parents throughout their marriage on a remembrance table, as well as the hand-illustrated family tree I had spent months constructing as an anniversary gift. By 6:30, visitors began to arrive. My parents emerged to cheers, my mother gorgeous in a blue dress and my father smiling with pride. The smiles on their faces made all of the tension worthwhile until Brielle came. She and Nathan were 20 minutes late because Brielle insisted on changing clothes 4 times, as I subsequently discovered. She walked in wearing a crimson couture gown that was way too formal, with diamonds sparkling everywhere. Mia trailed following in a smaller imitation of her mother's clothing, appearing uncomfortable. Brielle apologized profusely for being late, air-kissing my mother. Traffic was terrible, and I just had to make sure we looked decent. Some of us recognized the significance of presenting at important occasions. Her gaze shifted to my plain black cocktail dress, which I had picked specifically to avoid drawing notice from my mother. Mom frowned somewhat, but as usual she just thanked Brielle and complimented Mia. The seating arrangements had been meticulously selected. My parents are in the center, surrounded by their oldest friends. Nathan, Brielle and Mia at one end, Holly and I at the other. This was intended to keep Brielle and I at a safe distance. But Brielle had different intentions. As everyone took their seats, she said, "Oh, there must be a mistake. As the eldest son's wife, I should be sitting next to Elaine. On such a significant event, family members should be near, don't you think?" Before I could respond, Mom changed the place cards, displacing my mother's best friend, Diane, who had come in from Arizona for the occasion. The ripple effect caused several other visitors to shuffle, resulting in confusion and uncomfortable stares. I caught Holly's eye from across the table. She gently shook her head, urging me not to cause a disturbance. During appetizers, Brielle dominated the conversation, focusing primarily on her accomplishments. She'd recently been elevated to marketing director at her father's firm, a job that everyone knew was established particularly for her and had no actual responsibilities. "It's simply so satisfying to be rewarded for hard work," she added, gazing directly at me. "Not everyone understands the devotion required to thrive in the business world. Some people choose easier, more creative ways, which is great, I suppose. My father, ever the diplomat, attempted to incorporate me. Tessa has just finished a large branding project for a new technology business. What was its name again, sweetheart? Before I could respond, Brielle interjected. Oh, Richard, speaking of technology, have I told you about the new relationship I've struck with Tesla? Daddy claims it's the largest transaction our firm has ever made. This pattern persisted throughout the evening. Brielle is interrupting, diverting, and covertly undermining everyone, particularly myself. I focused on ensuring that the service ran smoothly, silently talking with the wait staff. As I returned to my seat after conversing with a head waiter, I observed something peculiar. Brielle had temporarily left the table, stating that she needed to freshen herself. As she returned, I noticed her reach inside her enormous luxury handbag and carefully place something in an interior pocket. From my vantage point, I noticed what looked to be a second wallet, distinct from the red leather designer wallet I had previously seen her use. My initial assumption was that she had found an old wallet. However, the furtive manner she glanced about as she did so raised a strong suspicion. Brielle's body language when she was preparing anything wicked has grown more apparent to me over the years. She had a tiny tightening of her eyes, a planning expression. I saw that face now, and it sent shivers down my spine. For a brief while, I pondered addressing her, but various factors kept me back. This was my parents' special night, and they had had enough of our disagreements. Without understanding exactly what she was up to, any charge would sound crazy and petty. And, perhaps most crucially, a little voice inside me said that sometimes the best way to deal with a trap is to let it fall on its own terms. So I watched and waited, keeping a polite look as my mind raced. Brielle returned to her seat and placed her enormous purse on the floor between her chair and mine, despite the fact that the table had a perfectly decent hook under it. The bag was clearly within reach of my chair. Another aspect that seems purposefully manufactured. Throughout the main course, I spoke cheerfully with the other guests while keeping an eye on Brielle's luggage. I noticed her checking it multiple times, apparently for her phone or a tissue, but always with a calculating face. Whatever game she was playing, she was setting the stage with precision, and for the first time in our long history of fighting, I felt one step ahead of her. The tension in the private dining area increased. What should have been a love celebration seemed like a conversational minefield. Elegant platters of osso buco and homemade pasta receded into the background. Uncle Frank, my father's brother, who never quite mastered reading a room, raised the family cabin in Michigan. So, Richard, have you chosen who would receive the cabin in the will? Not to seem morbid, but I was discussing inheritance planning with my financial advisor. A deep quiet descended. Nathan, Holly and I have innumerable great memories from the cabin, which is 3 generations old. It was also a subject of contention since Brielle had stated that she intended to remodel it into a true lake house and effectively claim it as her own. We haven't made any final decisions, my father remarked cautiously, seeming uneasy. That isn't really dinner conversation, Frank. But Brielle spotted an opportunity. So, since it came up, Nathan and I have been brainstorming some fantastic ideas for renovating the cabin. It needs extensive improvements, and we would be happy to invest in them provided, well, you know. She smiled sweetly. It would be a very special environment for Mia to grow up in, just like Nathan did. The connotation was very apparent. The cottage should be given to them because they have a child. I felt the usual tightness in my chest that emerged whenever Brielle used her position as the mother of the only grandchild to obtain an advantage. The cabin is perfect as it is, I responded, trying to keep my voice light. The entire objective is the rustic charm and family heritage. Modernizing it would eliminate what makes it unique. Brielle's eyes narrowed slightly. That is a common response from someone who is reluctant to constructive change. The cottage has plumbing from the 1970s, Tessa. Surely even you can tell that something has to be updated. I said that there is a distinction between required renovations and entirely destroying the essence of a site. My mother, seeing the impending storm, immediately shifted the conversation to Holly's recent promotion. But Brielle was not finished. Speaking about careers, she intervened after Holly had just spoken for 45 seconds. I've heard that graphic design positions are being swiftly displaced by artificial intelligence. Tessa, are you concerned? It must be quite stressful to work in a declining field. All eyes went to me. Classic Brielle, a topic intended to put me on the defensive. Actually, I responded, keeping a relaxed grin, human ingenuity and knowledge of emotional resonance are all things AI cannot mimic. My client list is rising as firms notice that link, but I appreciate your concern for my job. The discourse alternated between happy reminiscences and Brielle's stinging remarks. By the time dessert was served, I was emotionally exhausted from the continual attention necessary to avoid her attacks. "Excuse me for a moment," I murmured, getting up. "I need to check with the kitchen about the anniversary cake." In reality, all I wanted was a break from Brielle's calculating look and subtle digs. I stepped out into the restaurant's modest outdoor terrace. I took a deep breath and leaned on the stone balustrade, gazing up at the few stars visible through Chicago's light pollution. In that calm time, I thought about my possibilities. I could follow the pattern of the last 7 years, repelling her attacks. I could escalate, eventually calling her out publicly, or I could find a medium ground that maintained my dignity while without jeopardizing my parents' celebration. As I stood there wondering, I remembered the peculiar behavior of the second wallet. Whatever she had planned, it was certainly destined to happen tonight. The notion gave me a cold. After approximately 7 minutes, I realized I needed to return. As I walked back, I noticed Marco, the owner, talking to a server and indicating toward our private room. He met my gaze and gave me a brief, comforting nod. During the planning process, I discussed the family dynamics to him, and he pledged to guarantee that the evening ran successfully. That modest show of solidarity bolstered my determination. When I returned, dessert was served, a lovely tiramisu. As soon as I took my seat, I sensed a change. Brielle sat up taller, an almost imperceptible smile flickering on her lips. Nathan seemed nervous, looking at his dessert. My father was telling me about their honeymoon, but Brielle was hardly paying attention, her gaze shifting between me and her bags, which was still positioned between our chairs. I had barely finished my first mouthful of tiramisu when Brielle screamed loudly, interrupting my father's words. "My wallet," she shouted, bringing her palm to her chest in an exaggerated display of sorrow. "I can't find my wallet." The discussion ended. Everyone turned to look at Brielle, who was now making a show of looking through her bags. "Are you certain you brought it?" my mother inquired, alarmed. "Have you checked your coat?" "Of course I brought it," Brielle said, swiftly adjusting her expression to one of anxiety. "I have it right here. I used it to pay the coat check. Someone must have taken it." She began searching about anxiously, checking beneath the table and requesting that others check near their seats. I observed she took care to keep everyone's attention away from her own purse, where I assumed the missing wallet was still safely kept. "Diane mentioned that you may have left it in the restroom." No, Brielle said, her voice rising sharply. "It was immediately inside my suitcase. It has all of my credit cards, my driver's license, and even images of Mia that cannot be replaced." As the search extended and visitors began to stand, I noticed Brielle's eyes dart toward me many times, measuring my response. Even as I sensed the trap closing in on me, I kept a neutral demeanor, and even assisted in looking about. "Wait," Brielle interrupted abruptly, her voice lowering to a dramatic hush. "Tessa, when did you leave the table earlier, and where did you go?" The question hovered in the air, like a thundercloud. Several individuals looked perplexed, not fully comprehending the meaning, but I understood precisely what she was attempting. I walked to the terrace for some fresh air, responded evenly, and then talked to Marco about the cake. "Why are you asking?" Brielle's eyes sharpened, and I could see she was pleased that I had walked right into her script. "Isn't it funny," she asked slowly, "that my wallet disappears just as you leave the table? And you were gone for a long time, weren't you?" The mood changed suddenly. I could sense the uneasy tension as people realized what Brielle was implying. My mother was shocked, and my father was perplexed and disturbed. Holly was almost out of her seat, rage on her face, but I caught her eye and gently shook my head. This was between Brielle and I. "Are you insinuating that I snatched your wallet?" I asked, my voice steady. "That's a serious accusation, Brielle." She did not answer directly. Instead, he turned to the entire table and said, "Has anyone seen my wallet? It's a red leather Prada with a gold clasp, really unique and definitely costly." No one had, of course, since I was more convinced it was exactly where Brielle had hidden it, waiting for her theatrical unveiling. The private dining area at Salvatore's became utterly quiet. The waitstaff, feeling the tension, had discreetly retreated. Even the gentle Italian music seems to have diminished. Brielle rose up slowly, her chair scratching across the wooden floor, piercing the quiet like a knife. Every eye in the room was on her as she stood up to her full height, her countenance shifting from troubled search to righteous rage. "You," she continued, pointing straight at me and raising her voice to a near yell. "You stole my wallet, you filthy thief." No one responded for a time as the charge lingered in the air, so terrible and unexpected. My father was the first to recover. "Now, Brielle," he continued, his principal's authoritative voice making an unexpected entrance. "That is a very serious allegation to make without any evidence." But Brielle remained undeterred. She was completely dedicated to her portrayal, her cheeks flushed with what looked to be real indignation. "I have suspected for years that things go missing when Tessa is around," she told me. "A set of earrings from the guest bathroom, money from Nathan's wallet, and Mia's birthday gift card from last year. I never said anything because I wanted to maintain the peace. But this is excessive." I felt like I'd been physically hit. Not only was she accusing me of taking her pocketbook tonight, but she was also blaming me for other purported crimes that I had never heard of before to this moment. I looked at Nathan, expecting him to defend me. But he was looking at the tablecloth, his expression inscrutable. "That is absolutely not true," I answered, struggling to keep my voice calm. "I've never taken anything that did not belong to me. Not tonight, not ever." My rejection appeared to boost Brielle's performance. She turned to face the table, her look now one of sadness and vindication. "Do you see how she lies? Always so lovely and innocent. Tessa, a graphic designer. Tessa, the loving daughter. Tessa, whom everyone adores. But I know what she truly is." The visitors shifted uneasily. Some seemed perplexed, while others were ashamed. My mother had tears in her eyes, and my father seemed older than I had ever seen him. The creases on his face deepened as he became distressed. I felt a broad range of feelings. Humiliation consumed me. Anger surged through my temples at the blatant unfairness. But underlying those quick impulses, a weird calm was emerging. I knew what was coming. I'd seen the setup, recognized the trap, and although a part of me wanted to jump to my feet and scream the truth, another, greater part, advised patience. Allow her to play her hand thoroughly. "I do not appreciate being called a thief or a liar," I remarked quietly, especially at our parents' anniversary party. Brielle's eyes shone with pride at what she plainly saw as a weak resistance. And then she made the move I'd been waiting for. "Well, if you're so innocent," she said. "You won't mind if we check your things." Before I could react, she reached down to my feet where my little clutch purse was alongside the chair. I purposefully bought a little evening bag that could only accommodate my phone, lipstick and keys in order to avoid bringing anything superfluous. "That's hardly large enough to hide a wallet," Holly pointed out forcefully. "No," Brielle agreed, straightening out with a predatory smile. "But this is." She grabbed for the enormous tote bag that had been resting between our chairs, which I knew belonged to her, but she now claimed was mine. "That's not my bag," I answered gently. "Oh." Brielle lifted a finely sculpted brow. "Then who is it? It's been sitting right beside you all evening." Before I could react, she opened the tote bag and dramatically reached inside. Even though I had expected this moment, the delight on her face as her palm wrapped around what she was looking for made my stomach churn. "Well, well, well," she said, her voice full of feigned astonishment as she triumphantly drew out her red Prada pocketbook. "What do we have here?" "My wallet is in your backpack, see? I knew it was you." The collective gasp from across the table was audible. My mother grabbed her lips and her eyes widened in horror. My father was distraught, split between his want to believe in his daughter and the obviously incontrovertible facts. "Tessa," Nathan eventually said, his voice full of perplexity and regret. "How could you?" That stung more than anything else. The quick assumption of my guilt by my own brother. Brielle's influence had corroded his confidence in me to the point that he didn't examine this preposterous scenario. Brielle's eyes shone with satisfaction as she studied the horrified expressions. She had perfected her moment, producing a setting in which I seemed indisputably guilty. In her eyes, she had finally triumphed, humiliating me so severely that I would never recover. What she hadn't counted on was that I had predicted it from the outset. The stunned silence that followed Brielle's theatrical revelation seemed to last an eternity. My relatives and friends looked at the crimson pocketbook in her palm, then at me, their expressions a combination of perplexity, disappointment, and unease. The ideal anniversary party had gone horribly wrong, and I was suddenly the obvious villain of the evening. And then I did something unexpected. I laughed. It began as a small chuckle and quickly escalated into full-fledged, genuine laughter that I couldn't stop. The absurdity of the situation, Brielle's elaborate trap, and her belief that she had finally outmaneuvered me, all made me laugh. In that moment of tension, my laughter broke the stillness. Brielle's triumphant expression faded, giving way to confusion and anger. "What's wrong with you?" she demanded. "I just caught you red-handed stealing my wallet, and you are laughing." I took a deep breath and composed myself, but a smile remained. "I'm laughing, Brielle," I responded, "because that is not your bag, and we both know it." I pointed to the designer tote that had sat between our chairs all evening. "That is your bag. You purposefully placed it there, and you put your second wallet inside earlier this evening." Her face paled slightly, but she quickly recovered. "What are you talking about?" "This is clearly your bag, and my wallet was inside." "Actually," I said calmly, "if you look inside that bag, you'll notice that it contains items that belong to you, not me. Perhaps your makeup compact with your initials, or the specific brand of hand sanitizer you always carry, or even a small notebook where you jot down perceived slights from family members to discuss later." I'd been paying close attention to Brielle for years, taking note of these minor details. The look of shock on her face told me that at least some of my guesses were correct. "You're trying to confuse everyone," Brielle insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "The fact remains that my wallet was in this bag next to your chair." "Yes," I agree. "In your bag, which you carefully positioned to appear as if it might be mine after I watched you place a second wallet inside it when you returned from the restroom earlier." Gasps and murmurs echoed around the table as the implications became clear. My mother's expression changed from distress to confusion. My father went from disappointment to careful consideration. "This is ridiculous," Brielle exclaimed. "You're making up stories to cover your theft." "Actually," I replied, "there's a way to settle this definitively." I turned toward the back of the room, where Marco, the restaurant's owner, had been quietly watching. "Marco, could you please share what we discussed during the planning of tonight's event?" Marco stepped forward, his professional demeanor tinged with unease. "When Miss Harper was organizing this celebration, she asked about our security measures," he told me. "I told her that, following a theft last year, we installed discrete security cameras in all of our private dining rooms. They are primarily intended to protect our guests' belongings, but they record continuously." Brielle's face lost color so quickly that I thought she might faint. "You knew," she said quietly, looking at me. "You knew there were cameras, and you let me." "I knew there were cameras," I stated. "What I didn't realize was exactly what you were planning. But when I noticed you hiding something in that bag, I suspected it was something like this. I just didn't expect you to go so far as to publicly accuse me of theft." Nathan had been listening to this exchange with increasing horror on his face. He stood up abruptly. "Marco, can you show us the security footage right now?" Marco nodded. "Of course, we have immediate access to it in my office." "I don't think that's necessary," Brielle responded quickly, her voice high and tight. "It has gotten out of hand. It was clearly just a misunderstanding." But Nathan was already approaching Marco, his expression grim. "I want to see the footage now." I remained seated as Nathan, my father, and Marco exited the room. The atmosphere they left behind was dense with tension. Brielle remained standing, her hands gripping the back of her chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. My mother glanced between us, her expression unreadable. Holly had a small, satisfied smile on the corners of her mouth. The minutes stretched on indefinitely. Nobody spoke. The remaining guests fidgeted uncomfortably, clearly wishing to leave but constrained by social convention. Finally the door opened, and Nathan returned. His face was set in hard lines I'd never seen before, and his eyes were cold as they focused on his wife. "The cameras show everything," he explained, his voice flat. "They show Brielle taking a wallet from her purse, putting it in a tote bag, and placing the bag between the chairs. They show her repeatedly checking to make sure Tessa hadn't noticed, and she is clearly seen removing the wallet during her dramatic accusation." Every eye in the room was drawn to Brielle, who now appeared terrified. "Nathan," she said. "I can explain." "Don't," he interrupted her, his voice sharp as a blade. "Please don't. We'll discuss it at home." The silence that ensued was deafening. I'd been waiting years for this moment of vindication, for someone in my family to finally recognize Brielle for who she truly was. But now that it had arrived, I felt no triumph, only deep sadness for my brother and niece. I slowly stood up, drawing all eyes to me. "Mom, Dad," I said softly. "I'm very sorry that this happened during your celebration. This evening was supposed to be about your 41-year love and commitment, not any of this." My mother's eyes welled up with tears, but they weren't the ones I'd seen before. "Oh, Tessa," she added. "We're the ones who should apologize. We should have seen what was going on." I moved around the table to embrace her, and as I did so, I felt the weight of years of silent pain lift. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally revealed. The remainder of the anniversary dinner took place in a strange, subdued atmosphere. Brielle sat rigid in her chair, barely touching her dessert, while Nathan kept a cold silence. Mia, sensing but not understanding the tension, became increasingly agitated until Holly quietly offered to take her outside for a walk. My parents made a valiant effort to salvage the celebration, thanking guests and reflecting. Their closest friends pulled together admirably, creating pockets of genuine warmth amid the awkwardness. As the evening came to a close and guests began to leave, everyone who approached me did so with a new awareness in their eyes. Some quietly apologized for having doubted me. Others simply squeezed my hand or shoulder, offering silent support. Diane, my mother's best friend, hugged me tightly. "I always knew that woman was trouble," she muttered angrily. "Good for you for standing your ground." My father appeared shocked. As he assisted my mother with her coat, I noticed him place a protective hand on her back, as if the evening had reminded him of the importance and fragility of family ties. When only my immediate family remained, my father spoke openly about what had occurred. "I owe you an apology, Tessa," he said, his voice full of regret. "We've noticed tension between you and Brielle for years, but we dismissed it as typical in-law dynamics. We never imagined it would go this deep." My mother nodded, tears forming again. "We should have protected you better. We were so focused on keeping the peace that we didn't notice who was causing it." "It's not your fault," I assured them, my voice full of emotion. "Brielle is extremely skilled at presenting one face to some people and another to others, and I never wanted to force anyone to take sides." Nathan, who had been standing silently near the door, approached us. "I need to talk to you," he told me, his voice rough and emotional. "Alone if that's okay." We walked out onto the same patio where I had collected myself earlier. The night had become cooler. Nathan took a long look at the city lights before speaking. "I don't even know where to begin," he finally admitted. "I feel like the world's biggest fool." "You're not a fool," I said softly. "You wanted to believe the best in the person you loved. There is nothing foolish about that." He shook his head sharply. "Stop being too understanding. I do not deserve it. For years I've dismissed your concerns, defended her actions, and even accused you of being jealous or difficult. And all this time," his tone rang hollow, "all this time, she was deliberately trying to hurt you, to drive a wedge between us." I had imagined this moment of validation countless times, but now that it had arrived, I found no comfort in my brother's pain. "What are you planning to do?" I asked quietly. Nathan ran his hand over his face, looking exhausted. "I do not know. I need to think about Mia, and what is best for her. But I know I can't simply pretend this did not happen. Brielle's actions tonight were not a momentary lapse in judgment, it was calculated and cruel. It leaves me wondering what else she's capable of." Before I could respond, the patio door opened and Brielle emerged. Her makeup was freshly applied, but it couldn't conceal the redness under her eyes or the tight, defensive set of her mouth. "The car is waiting," she told Nathan, her voice brittle. "Mia is tired." Nathan looked at her for a long time and I noticed a change in his expression, a hardening that I had not seen before. "Take Mia home," he instructed. "I will take a ride with my parents or Tessa. We need some space tonight." Brielle's composure slipped, revealing a moment of panic. "Nathan, please, we need to discuss this." "Yes we do," he confirmed. "Not tonight. Tonight, I need to process what I saw on the security footage." For a brief moment, I expected Brielle to continue her argument, but after a tense silence, she simply nodded and walked away. The sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floors faded as she returned to get Mia. Nathan returned his attention to me after she had left. "I am very sorry, Tess. I know those words are insufficient, but they're all I have right now." I reached out and squeezed his hand gently. "They are enough for tonight. The rest we'll figure out as we go." When we got back inside, my parents and Holly were waiting. Without Brielle's divisive presence, the five of us, our core family unit, stood together in a moment of silent reconnection. Then Holly broke the silence with her characteristic directness. "Well, that was the most dramatic anniversary dinner in history. Congratulations, Mom and Dad. You'll definitely remember this one." Surprisingly, this broke the tension. My father chuckled. My mother smiled through her tears, and even Nathan managed a weak laugh. We gathered our things, thanked Marco profusely for his discretion and help, and made our way out into the night. As we stood on the sidewalk saying our goodbyes, my mother pulled me into a fierce hug. "I am so proud of how you handled yourself tonight," she whispered. "You showed grace under incredible pressure." "I learned from the best," I told her, holding her tight. As I drove home alone later, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. The satisfaction of finally having the truth exposed was tempered by concern for my brother and niece. Family dynamics were complicated, and I knew tonight's revelations would have far-reaching consequences. But for the first time in 7 years, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The constant need to defend myself, to question my own perceptions, to walk on eggshells around Brielle, all of it was shifting. The truth had a power of its own, and once revealed, it could not be unseen. When I reached my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and poured myself a small glass of wine. Sitting by the window overlooking the city, I raised the glass in a silent toast to my parents' 41 years of marriage, to truth, and to the uncertain but hopeful future of our family. In the weeks following that infamous anniversary dinner, our family entered a period of painful but absolutely necessary transformation. The immediate aftermath was exactly as difficult as I had anticipated. Nathan moved into our parents' guest room, explaining to Mia that Daddy needed to help Grandpa with some projects. It was a flimsy excuse that the perceptive 5-year-old clearly didn't fully believe, but it provided a gentle buffer for her. Brielle, for her part, cycled through a range of strategies to manage the fallout. First came tearful apologies and claims she had suffered a momentary breakdown due to stress. When those fell on deaf ears, she attempted to minimize her actions, suggesting everyone was overreacting to what was merely a misguided prank. Finally, when those approaches failed, she resorted to what I suspected was her true nature: cold calculation, hiring an expensive divorce attorney, and threatening to limit Nathan's access to Mia if he pursued separation. That final move backfired spectacularly. The security footage from the restaurant, which Marco had preserved, provided compelling evidence of Brielle's deliberate attempt to frame me and damage my reputation. When Nathan's attorney suggested this demonstrated a pattern of manipulative behavior that might be relevant in custody considerations, Brielle's aggressive stance softened considerably. By the 4-month mark after the dinner, Nathan had filed for divorce and moved into his own apartment. He and Brielle established a tentative co-parenting arrangement, with Mia spending equal time with both parents. The transition was hardest on Mia. "Aunt Tess," she asked me during one of our outings as we shared ice cream on a park bench, "did Mommy do something bad?" The question caught me off guard, and I chose my words carefully. "Grown-ups sometimes make mistakes in how they treat each other, sweetie. Your mom and dad are working through some grown-up problems, but they both love you very much. That will never change." Mia seemed to consider this seriously, then nodded with the simple acceptance children often show for complex situations. "Daddy's sad a lot now," she observed. "But he smiles more when you visit." My heart ached for her, but also for Nathan. My relationship with my parents also evolved. My father, the lifelong educator, took the situation as a personal failure. "I should have seen what was happening," he told me during a private conversation, his voice heavy with regret. "I observed students and their dynamics for 33 years, but I missed what was right in front of me in my own family." "Dad," I reminded him gently. "Brielle fooled a lot of people for a long time. That was her specialty." My mother, ever the nurturer, focused on healing. She instituted weekly family dinners, minus Brielle, where we gradually relearned how to communicate openly. These gatherings were awkward at first, but over time they became a sanctuary where authentic connection could flourish again. Holly, true to form, approached the situation with characteristic directness. "I've been waiting 7 years to say, 'I told you so,'" she announced to Nathan at one of these dinners. "But now that I can, it doesn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would." Her honesty somehow broke through some of the tension, and Nathan actually laughed, perhaps his first genuine laugh since that night. As for me, the vindication I had longed for came with unexpected emotional complications. For years I had channeled my frustration with Brielle into my work, using graphic design projects as an outlet for emotions I couldn't express within the family. Now that the truth was known, I found myself at a creative crossroads, unsure where to direct that energy. The initial weeks after the dinner were difficult. I experienced a roller coaster of emotions: relief, anger at the years of gaslighting, guilt over my brother's pain, and anxiety about the future. There were nights I lay awake replaying every interaction with Brielle, seeing with new clarity the calculated nature of her behavior from the very beginning. During this period, I sought help from a therapist, Dr. Natalie Reyes, who specialized in family dynamics and emotional recovery. Her guidance was invaluable. "What you experienced was a form of psychological abuse," she explained. "Having your perceptions repeatedly denied or dismissed can make you question your own reality. That's called gaslighting, and recovery takes time." With Dr. Reyes's help, I began to rebuild my sense of self-trust. I reconnected with friends who had drifted away, many of whom had sensed something was wrong but hadn't known how to help. I focused on self-care, setting aside time for activities that nourished my spirit, hiking along Lake Michigan, taking a pottery class, reading for pleasure again. Professionally, I channeled my renewed energy into my design business. I'd always been good at my work, but now I found a new level of confidence in my creative vision. I took risks with clients I might have avoided before, proposing bold concepts that pushed boundaries. To my surprise, these were often the ideas that resonated most strongly. Within 8 months, I landed 3 major contracts with national brands and hired my first employee to help manage the increased workload. The most profound healing, however, came through an unexpected channel. About 6 months after the anniversary dinner, I received a message from a woman named Claire, who introduced herself as Brielle's former college roommate. She had heard about the incident through mutual acquaintances and reached out because, as she put it, "I've been where you are." Over coffee at a quiet cafe, Claire shared her own experiences with Brielle during their university years. The patterns were strikingly familiar: the careful cultivation of allies, the subtle undermining, the elaborate setups designed to make Claire appear unstable or unreliable. The conversation was both validating and healing, a confirmation that what I had experienced wasn't isolated or imagined. "It took me years to trust my own perceptions again after living with her," Claire confessed. "But you know what helped the most? Finding others who had been through similar experiences, knowing I wasn't alone." Inspired by this connection, I started a small private support group for people recovering from relationships with manipulative individuals. We met monthly, sharing stories and strategies for healing. Through helping others, I found my own path forward, transforming pain into purpose. As the 18-month anniversary of that fateful dinner approached, I reflected on everything that had changed. Nathan was dating again cautiously, a kindergarten teacher he met at one of Mia's school events. My parents seemed lighter, their relationship strengthened by weathering the crisis. Holly had been promoted and was considering a master's degree. And me, I had learned lessons that would shape the rest of my life. I learned the value of patience, of strategic thinking, of waiting for the right moment rather than reacting immediately. I learned that sometimes the most powerful response to manipulation is simply allowing the truth to reveal itself. Most importantly, I learned that standing in your truth, even when others doubt you, is not selfishness, but self-preservation. For years, I had silenced myself to keep the peace, believing that harmony required my silence. Now, I understood that real harmony can only exist where truth is honored and respected. The last time I saw Brielle was at Mia's 6th birthday party, a carefully orchestrated neutral event at a children's play center. We acknowledged each other with tight nods from across the room, but didn't speak. I noticed she wore a mask of cheerful politeness that never quite reached her eyes, and I wondered if she had already found new targets for her manipulations. But that was no longer my concern. I had reclaimed my voice, my family, and my power. The journey through pain had led to a place of authentic strength, and that, perhaps, is the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest growth comes through our deepest wounds. The very experiences designed to break us can become the foundation for building a more genuine, powerful version of ourselves if we have the courage to face them honestly and the wisdom to transform them into something meaningful. My jealous sister-in-law spoofed my email to insult clients, but after I created a fake company as a trap, she fell for it and got caught instantly. Last October, I thought my biggest worry was a looming promotion. Then an email I never wrote landed on a client's desk, and the first thread of a much darker family secret began to unravel. I'm Rachel, a 30-year-old female who works in digital marketing. I've worked in this field for roughly 10 years, beginning as an intern right after college and gradually working my way up. I currently work as a senior marketing manager for a mid-sized agency that manages campaigns for technology companies and startups. Years of long hours, weekend projects, and ongoing learning of new platforms have led me to where I am now. I've won a few industry awards for campaigns I've led, And my employer has suggested that a director post would open up next year. My brother-in-law, Paul, 34, married Noah, 28, about 4 years ago. Paul is my husband Neil's younger brother. Becky used to work part-time in a dentist office performing administrative work before they had children. She stayed at home with her 2 children for around 3 years. During family gatherings, she always seemed interested in what everyone did for work, but she paid special attention to asking me extensive questions about my career. At first, I assumed she was simply making conversation. She'd inquire about my day-to-day tasks, the software I used, the clients I dealt with, and how I got into marketing. I was delighted to share because I enjoy talking about my profession, and I suspected she was considering a career move. Noah has always needed to be the focus of attention. During family dinners, she would stop talks to share long stories about her children, or gripe about other neighbors and friends. Paul would simply smile and nod along, but I could see other family members were growing tired of her relentless need to dominate the conversation. Noah announced her return to work approximately 7 months ago. She had taken some online digital marketing classes and gotten a junior position at a small marketing business across town. The entire family, including me, was thrilled for her. I complimented her and offered to help if she ever had any concerns about the industry. She seems grateful at the time. That's when things got weird. Noah started asking more specific questions regarding my work. She wanted to know which firms I worked for, what my job title was, how much experience different roles required, and even the specifics of my company's customer acquisition strategy. I still answered her questions since I assumed she was only trying to learn from someone more experienced. Then her attitude toward me entirely shifted. At Paul's birthday celebration in October, I stated that my team had recently signed a significant client. Noah's expression turned frigid, and she mentioned how some individuals got lucky with connections. When I mentioned that the client reached us after viewing our work online, she abruptly walked out in the middle of the session. 2 weeks later, Noah wrote on LinkedIn that she was delighted to begin working with her new company's strong client list. She shared an article about digital marketing trends, and commented on how pleasant it was to work somewhere that prioritized talent over politics. I'm probably reading too much into it, but it seemed like a dig at me and my company. I learned from Paul that Noah had accepted a job at Hartwell Marketing, which is one of our main competitors. I sent her a note congratulating her on her new role, but she never responded. Neil claimed I was overthinking things, but the entire atmosphere seemed odd. Everything burst in December. My employer summoned me to his office on a Tuesday morning, appearing very concerned. He stated that he had gotten multiple complaints regarding inappropriate emails that appeared to emanate from my business address. Over the last week, we sent emails to 3 of our major clients and 2 co-workers. I was very confused because I had not sent any strange emails. My manager showed me printouts of the messages. They were written in a way that seemed familiar, but was slightly off. One communication to a client featured quite scathing criticisms of their previous marketing efforts. Another email to a coworker contained disparaging remarks about their presentation skills. The worst one was delivered to our newest client, informing them that their budget demands were unrealistic and their product was dull. The emails were from an address that was nearly identical to mine, but with a little change. My genuine email is rachel.mmichel@creativeedge.com, but these emails were sent from rachel.creativeedge.co. The domain was lacking the M and the com. My supervisor claimed he realized something was amiss right away since the tone was so different from how I generally communicated with clients. Our IT department got engaged and discovered the bogus email account. They also discovered that someone had tried to access my real email account several times in the last month. Security cameras proved that no one else had physical access to my computer, indicating that this was an external attack. While reviewing the bogus emails with IT, I came across something that made my stomach drop. One of the emails stated that our client's product launch timeline was overly aggressive given their little social media presence. This was something I had only said at Paul and Noah's house 3 weeks prior, during Sunday dinner. I had discussed assisting a client who was rushing their product launch, and I especially noted their inadequate social media approach. No one else at work was aware of the full details of this particular client. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the synchronicity was too clear to ignore. I called my cybersecurity friend Jake and asked him to look into the bogus email account. He tracked the IP address and geographical information. The emails were received from Noah's area, specifically a coffee shop 2 streets from her home. This wasn't conclusive proof, but when combined with the inside information revealed in the emails, I was convinced Noah was behind it. Instead of approaching her directly or informing her family, I chose to test my notion. At our next family meeting, I cooked up a narrative about getting a new customer. I informed everyone at dinner that my company had recently secured a contract with a fictitious tech startup named Bluestream Solutions. I made sure to add particular information about this fictitious company, such as their emphasis on AI-powered customer service solutions and plans for a spring product launch. 4 days later, my supervisor summoned me to his office again. Another bogus email had been sent, this time to one of our legitimate customers. The email recommended that they work with organizations who had experience with AI startups, such as Bluestream Solutions, hinting that our agency was behind the times. That was all the proof I needed. I told my boss everything, even my doubts about Noah. Our legal team logged all of the bogus emails and blacklisted the false email addresses. They claimed they could take legal action, but I asked them not to. I did not want to cause a major family conflict over what was essentially an unsuccessful attempt to harm my reputation. My manager was extremely supportive throughout the entire process. He said that the false emails made Noah appear worse than they did me, because anyone familiar with my work would understand that they were not written by me. He further said that this type of behavior occurs more frequently than people think in competitive businesses. I never challenged Noah directly about his emails. She was particularly silent over Christmas dinner, scarcely making eye contact with me. She departed early, claiming that one of the children was feeling sick. Paul later informed Neil that Noah had quit her position at Hartwell Marketing without providing a valid explanation. I learned from a recruiter acquaintance that Noah's name was already raising warning lights in our local marketing community. Her prior employer appeared to be examining some dubious conduct before she resigned. They thought she was exchanging secret client information with competitors, but they couldn't prove it. My career has actually improved since the incident. My boss promoted me to senior marketing director in January, and I now oversee our largest client account. Meanwhile, Noah has been unemployed for 3 months and does not appear to be actively looking for work. The thing that has been plaguing me is whether I should have told the family what actually happened. Part of me believes Noah's career issues are the result of her own actions, and I don't need to get involved. But another part of me worries if my silence makes me complicit in some way. Neil believes I did the right thing by avoiding family conflict, but he is also dissatisfied with Noah's behavior. Paul appears utterly unaware of what his wife was actually doing. He just continues stating she's stressed about going back to work and that everyone should be patient with her adjustment period. I'm not searching for vengeance or attempting to harm Noah's career. She's already done it herself. But I also don't want the family to think I'm to blame for her current unemployed. Noah has always been good at playing the victim when things don't go her way, and I'm concerned she'll start blaming me for her job woes. Should I inform Paul and the rest of the family what really happened, or should I simply let Noah deal with the repercussions of her own actions? I don't want to be the person who destroys family connections, but I also don't want to be held accountable for something I didn't do. Update 1. Thank you everybody for your feedback on my original post. Many of you thought I should have told the family right away, and to be honest, I was starting to believe you. However, recent events have persuaded me that keeping silent was probably the best option. The family relations have deteriorated significantly since my last post. Noah has been unemployed for about 4 months, and instead of accepting responsibility, she has manufactured a completely new version of events, in which I am the villain. It began roughly 2 weeks after my original post. Neil and I went to his parents' place to celebrate his mom's birthday. Noah was there with Paul and their children. I knew something was amiss from the moment we went in. Noah's sister, Amanda, 26F, was also present, and she gave me the coldest look I'd ever received from a family member. Throughout supper, there were strange moments of quiet when I spoke. Noah's mother inquired how work was going, and when I responded it was busy but excellent. Noah snorted and rolled her eyes. When Neil asked what was wrong, she said that she did not want to start anything on his mother's birthday. After dinner, I overheard Amanda conversing with Neil's cousin in the kitchen. She was expressing her disappointment that someone in her family would undermine another family member's career simply because they felt threatened. When I entered the kitchen to assist with the dishes, Amanda stopped chatting, and both women made excuses to leave the room. Neil approached Paul later, and we learned what Noah had been telling everyone. According to her version of events, I had been hurting her career from the start because I was envious of her early success in the profession. She alleged that I exploited my connections to propagate rumors about her work performance, and even persuaded my company to poach potential clients from her firm. The most ludicrous aspect of her argument was that she claimed I was sabotaging her because I was threatened by her natural marketing ability. She told the family that her superiors at Hartwell Marketing informed her that I had been contacting around to several firms, warning them about the quality of her work. None of this was real, but Noah had enough basic understanding of the industry to make her lies seem plausible. Paul seems to believe every word of it. According to Neil, Paul was furious with me but did not want to make a commotion at his mother's birthday. He informed Neil that he wanted me to apologize to Noah and assist her in finding a new employment to make amends for the alleged damage I had caused. The problem worsened during Easter dinner last month. Noah arrived looking fatigued and discouraged. She wore an outdated sweatshirt and barely spoke throughout the meal. When asked about her job search, she would simply shake her head and indicate she was considering her alternatives. Neil's mother approached me after dinner and asked what I could do to assist Noah get back on her feet. She acknowledged that professional competition could be strong, but family should come first. She suggested that Noah and I sort things out and even support each other in our jobs. I was so stunned that I couldn't answer appropriately. Neil's mother was basically asking me to remedy a situation Noah had created via her falsehoods. I responded non-committally, hoping Noah would find something soon, and then spent the remainder of the evening sitting silently in the corner. Neil was infuriated when I told him what his mother had said. He finally approached Paul, asking what Noah had told everyone about me. Paul detailed the full fake narrative, including how I had allegedly been working against Noah since she first entered the marketing business. Neil informed Paul that the entire tale was impossible because I had been nothing but supportive of Noah's job shift. He pointed out that I'd never said anything derogatory about Noah to anyone in our family, let alone strangers in the industry. Paul became defensive, claiming Neil was simply being loyal to his wife, but he knew what his wife had told him. The meeting concluded with Paul stating that Neil and I were no longer allowed at family events until I apologized to Noah and repaired the professional damage I had created. Neil advised him that wasn't the case, and that Paul should examine the chance that his wife wasn't telling the truth. Since then, we have been virtually cut off from the majority of Neil's family. His parents are still talking to us, but they are clearly uncomfortable with the scenario. Amanda has been posting passive-aggressive messages on social media about family devotion and supporting one another during difficult times. She's also posted pieces regarding workplace bullying and professional envy. The irony is that despite all of this familial conflict, my career has managed to thrive. I received another promotion last month, and my new director position came with a substantial salary rise. My employer has been discussing the possibility of adding a larger office next year and has asked me to lead the expansion project. Meanwhile, Noah has still not found a new work. According to Paul, she has been applying for jobs but has not received any interviews. He informed Neil's parents that the unfavorable references from our industry network have made it impossible for her to obtain work. I've been tempted several times to tell the family the truth about what Noah did. I have all of the evidence from the false email inquiry, including IP address data and a timeline that shows she was behind the attacks on my reputation. But Neil keeps reminding me that proving Noah incorrect won't necessarily convince the family to believe me. They've already decided to accept her version of events, thus offering facts may make me appear overly defensive. The most difficult part is witnessing Neil deal with being cut off from his family. He has occasional chats with his parents, but they are difficult. His mother continually asking when we're going to work things out with Noah, as if the solution is solely up to me. Neil has been amazing throughout this. He never questioned whether Noah was speaking the truth, and he's been my staunchest advocate with his family. But I can tell how much it affects him to be apart from his parents and brother. I'm beginning to think that being silent was a mistake. Noah has had months to develop her victim narrative, and it is now so established that the truth may not matter. The family has decided that I am the evil guy, and they appear to be content with their decision. Part of me wants to let Noah continue to tarnish her industry name while I work on my own. But I hate that Neil is suffering because his family chose to believe lies about me. I'm also worried that Noah's conduct may worsen if she continues to experience professional rejection. At this time, I am unsure of the best course of action. Do I present the evidence and risk appearing vindictive, or should I continue to let Noah's actions speak for themselves? Update 2. I can't believe I'm back with another update, but things have turned out differently than I expected. Those who urged that I simply allow Noah's lies to catch up with her naturally were completely correct. Noah appears to have chosen to try her hand at marketing again about 6 weeks ago, using a slightly different moniker. Instead of Noah Chen Williams, she began applying for jobs as Noah C. Williams. I only found out because of what happened after. A project manager from another marketing agency called my office asking for me. She stated that she needed to verify some details concerning a portfolio sample supplied by a job candidate. The candidate had listed me as a professional reference and presented what seemed to be one of my published papers as her own. My assistant forwarded the phone to me, and I was utterly bewildered. I informed the project manager that I had not lately granted anyone permission to use me as a reference. She then revealed that the candidate's name was Noah C. Williams, and she had submitted an article I wrote about social media crisis management as part of her portfolio. I published the piece in a marketing trade publication about 8 months ago. It was based on a campaign I managed for a client who needed to rehabilitate their brand image following a product recall. The article contained particular case study information and strategic ideas that were totally my own work. I informed the project manager that I had never worked with Noah professionally and that she did not have authorization to use me as a reference. I also confirmed that the article was my work and included links to the original publication and my byline. The project manager thanked me and explained that they will handle the problem internally. She stated that Noah had interviewed well and that they were considering her for the role until this situation arose. They were obviously unable to proceed forward with her application. I thought that was the last of it, but then something else happened that truly triggered the floodgates. Neil's cousin Melissa, 24F, works in human resources at a separate marketing firm downtown. She had recently begun job seeking, and I had assisted her in updating her resume and practicing for interviews. Melissa called me 3 days following the reference verification episode. She was virtually yelling on the phone about how she realized Noah was using my name incorrectly. Apparently, someone in Melissa's professional networking circle suggested seeing Noah at an industry event. Noah introduced herself as a close colleague of mine, and had been using my name to gain credibility with other marketers. Melissa was terrified because she knew the truth about how supportive I had always been of Noah's job move. She immediately began asking around in her network about Noah's job applications, and learned that Noah had claimed to have worked on several projects that I had actually completed. Here's where things get extremely messy. Melissa informed her mother of what she had uncovered. Her mother is Neil's aunt. Within 2 days, the entire extended family learned that Noah had been caught lying about her professional credentials and illegally using my name. The family's reaction was not what I expected. Rather than being upset with Noah for her dishonesty, numerous family began to wonder why this was all being revealed now. Amanda commented on Facebook about how handy it was that these charges surfaced just as Noah was attempting to re-establish her career. Paul first defended Noah, claiming she was either misinformed about industry standards or made unintentional mistakes when networking. But when Melissa showed him the evidence from the agency where Noah had submitted my piece as her own, he couldn't dispute what had occurred. Noah responded by claiming that she had made terrible decisions because she was desperate to find work, but that her desperation was caused by the toxic work climate I had created for her in the local marketing community. She said she was forced to misrepresent her background since my negative influence had already turned prospective employers against her. When that reason did not work, Noah tried a fresh strategy. She explained to Paul that she had only used my name and work since she thought we were close enough professionally that I wouldn't object. She stated she had planned to inform me about it once she had settled into her new work. Paul called Neil to see if I would overlook Noah's faults and perhaps even provide her with a genuine reference to assist her get work. Neil told him no, and emphasized that what Noah had done may have gravely harmed my professional image. The conversation between Neil and Paul became heated. Paul accused Neil of prioritizing his wife over his family, and Neil responded that Paul was asking him to condone his wife's dishonest behavior. Paul hung up on him, and they have not spoken since. The ripple effects have been significant. The agency where Noah plagiarized my work has added her to their internal do not hire list and informed their industry connections. 2 additional companies have discreetly dropped her from consideration for jobs she sought for. Noah now claims that I planned a campaign to blacklist her from the whole local marketing business. She has been telling everyone who will listen that I utilized my professional connections to ruin her career out of jealousy and vengeance. The family is now divided into definite camps. Neil's parents are attempting to remain impartial, but they have ceased asking us to huge family gatherings to avoid confrontation. Amanda and a few other relatives have totally accepted Noah's victim narrative. Melissa and a handful of the younger relatives are solidly on my side, having experienced Noah's deception firsthand. I still haven't notified the family about the first email spoofing event, which occurred months ago. At this time, I am not convinced it would make a difference. Noah has demonstrated an unwillingness to accept responsibility for her actions by lying and manipulating others. My manager has been made abreast of the problem, which involves the unauthorized use of my professional identity. Our legal department has documented everything, in case Noah attempts to elevate her accusations that I harmed her career. The craziest aspect is that all I've done is protect myself and tell the truth when asked. Noah has caused this entire issue via her own actions, yet she has managed to persuade half of the family that I am the aggressor. Neil and I have begun to spend more time with my family and our friends. It's been a comfort to be around folks who understand my personality and don't believe insane conspiracy theories about my professional actions. I'm eager to see how long Noah can keep up her victim play, especially as more people in the industry become aware of her dishonest activities. The marketing community here is small, and news spreads quickly about untrustworthy individuals. Update 3. This will be my final report because the matter has essentially resolved itself, albeit not in the way I could have imagined. 3 weeks ago I attended a small networking event for marketing professionals in our city. The local marketing association hosted an invitation-only event for senior-level industry professionals. I had been looking forward to it because it provided an opportunity to meet with possible clients and partners in a casual situation. About halfway into the event, I observed a familiar face standing near the registration booth, talking to other guests. It took me a moment to recognize Noah. She had somehow gotten into this invitation-only gathering and was actively networking. I watched from across the room as she approached various groups of individuals. She was quite active and cheerful, clearly attempting to build connections. I observed she mentioned my name in a few conversations, stating we had collaborated on various projects. Jennifer, one of the event organizers, approached me approximately 20 minutes later. Jennifer works at the agency where Noah plagiarized my piece months ago. She inquired if I was aware that someone at the event claimed to be my former colleague. I informed Jennifer the truth about my relationship with Noah, including the earlier plagiarism issue. Jennifer's expression shifted drastically. She stated that Noah had registered for the event under the name R.C. Williams and had listed credentials, which Jennifer now recognized were most likely falsified. Jennifer excused herself and went to speak with the other event organizers. Within 10 minutes, 2 organizers approached Noah and requested to talk with her discreetly. I couldn't hear the talk, but I noticed Noah's body language become protective and furious. Noah was gently told to leave the event. As she was led away, she gazed at me with utter loathing. Even from across the room, I could see she was blaming me for her discovery, despite the fact that I had not told anyone about her existence. The following day, the marketing association sent an email to all event attendees informing them that an unwanted guest had been ejected from the previous evening's gathering. They reminded everyone that these gatherings were only open to recognized industry professionals, and that future attendance would involve additional verification procedures. This incident appeared to be the final straw for Noah's trust in our local marketing community. Jennifer later told me that word traveled rapidly about Noah's dishonest actions. Several agencies have formally marked her name in their applicant tracking systems. The familial turmoil has been fascinating to see. Paul finally appears to comprehend that his wife's professional issues are completely her own fault. Neil's parents sent us an awkward message, expressing their hope that we could all overcome our recent issues. Amanda has ceased making passive-aggressive social media posts regarding family loyalty. Noah herself has gone utterly mute. She is no longer active on social media and has not attended any family reunions since the networking event incident. Paul informed Neil that she has been seeking for positions outside of the marketing field, but those applications have been unsuccessful. Melissa informed me that Noah had also been inflating her qualifications on applications for non-marketing positions. She claimed to have management experience and superior technological talents that she did not truly have. Potential employers discovered these enhancements via background checks and reference checks. Paul has been performing the most of the childcare and household management while Noah has stayed at home. He appears fatigued whenever we meet him, and he has ceased defending Noah's actions. Last Saturday, during Neil's father's retirement celebration, Paul apologized to me for the strain his wife had created. The extended family has gradually resumed normal relations with Neil and myself. Nobody publicly apologized for believing Noah's falsehoods, but the cool treatment and passive antagonism have ended. Most family act as if the entire conflict never occurred. My working life has steadily improved. The director role I indicated in my original post became official last month, and I now lead a staff of 8. My boss's growth project is moving forward, and I'll be relocating to another city next year to manage our new office there. Neil and I have accepted the truth that our connection with Paul and Noah will never fully recover. Paul still appears to blame me for not assisting Noah when she was failing professionally, as if I had an obligation to support someone who was deliberately attempting to harm my career. Noah has effectively isolated herself from the family circle. She no longer attends events, and when she does, she only greets people briefly. Paul makes excuses for her absence, but everyone knows she's avoiding situations in which she could face the consequences of her lying. The most significant lesson I took away from this event was that sometimes the best way to deal with someone's poor behavior is to just protect yourself and let their actions speak for themselves. I never had to expose Noah or defend against her attacks. She harmed her own credibility by escalating dishonesty and poor decisions. I also learnt that while these kind of confrontations can be resolved, they permanently alter family connections. Neil's family will always remember this incident, even if they pretend it never occurred. Trust takes years to develop and seconds to break. Noah depleted her credibility and professional chances in less than a year. She moved from being a bright rookie in marketing to being almost unemployed in the sector. None of this was caused by anything I did to her. It was totally the outcome of her own decisions and actions. I'm not sure what Noah's plans are right now, and I honestly don't think about her much anymore. Neil and I are focused on our future transfer and the new prospects that await us. We've established a good life together, and we won't let someone else's destructive actions disrupt it. For anyone in a similar scenario, I recommend documenting everything, protect yourself professionally and avoid family drama. Sometimes the best retribution is simply living a good life and allowing dishonest individuals to face the natural consequences of their conduct. Final update. I didn't want to post again, but something happened last week that I believe provides a satisfactory finish to this entire affair. Neil and I were doing some last-minute shopping at a grocery store near our old neighborhood before we moved next month. We met Paul in the produce section. He was alone, which was uncommon as he and Noah usually shop together on weekends. Paul appeared exhausted and older than his 35 years. When he noticed us, he stopped for a time, as if he was unsure whether to acknowledge us or not. Neil said hello first, and Paul responded cordially, yet coldly. We talked briefly about Neil's new work in the city where we're moving. Paul inquired when we were leaving and expressed his hope that things would go well for us. He then paused and explained that he wanted to tell us something. Paul explained that Noah had been suffering from worry and sadness since losing her work. He stated she had been visiting a counselor, but he didn't say what they were working on. He explained how the counselor had suggested Noah accept responsibility for her role in the professional challenges she had encountered. Paul then stated that Noah revealed to him that she had made some terrible judgments while attempting to establish herself in the marketing sector. He didn't say exactly what she confessed to, but he admitted that her account of events wasn't totally correct. He didn't apologize explicitly, but he did acknowledge that he understood why Neil and I had isolated ourselves from their family. Paul expressed hope that they would someday be able to rebuild a connection with us, but he acknowledged that this would take time. Neil managed the conversation far better than I would have. He told Paul that we appreciated him reaching out and wished their family the best. He did not seek a specific apology or attempt to rebut what had occurred. Neil simply accepted Paul's acknowledgement and stated that we may possibly reconnect in the future when everyone was in a better place. Neil told me after Paul went that he was disappointed with the outcome of everything. Regardless of what Noah admitted or denied, his relationship with his brother was unlikely to remain the same. Too much harm had been done to the family dynamics. Melissa informed me that Noah had started working part-time at a retail business while he was purportedly seeking for office job. She is no longer looking for marketing gigs, which is probably a good thing considering her industry reputation. Melissa also said that Noah and Paul were having marital troubles, although she did not go into depth. As our transfer date approaches, our extended family has begun to reach out to us again. Neil's parents welcomed us to supper last weekend, and the discussion was relatively normal. Noah was not addressed, and no one brought up the previous year's events. Amanda even messaged me asking for my new address so she could give me a housewarming gift. She didn't apologize for her prior behavior, but the gesture felt like an admission that she was mistaken about the circumstances. Looking back on all that transpired, I am pleased with how I handled it. I maintained my professional reputation without compromising my ethics or falling to Noah's level. I let her actions speak for themselves, rather than attempting to dominate the story or push the family to take sides. Noah's professional self-destruction was all her doing. I never contacted potential employers about her, created stories, or attempted to harm her reputation. She accomplished all of this on her own by choosing to engage in fraud, plagiarism, and dishonesty. The family initially preferred to trust her lies rather than confront the reality about someone they cared about. However, the facts became too overwhelming to ignore. Noah's practice of dishonesty went beyond her confrontation with me, and others saw flaws in her tales. Neil and I are thrilled with our new location and the opportunity for a fresh start. I'll be supervising the new office expansion, which is a fantastic chance for my career. Neil got a terrific job with a company in our new city, and we're both ready to leave this drama behind. I don't expect Noah to ever fully accept responsibility for what she did, and that's great with me. She will have to live with the repercussions of her decisions, and they appear to be severe. Her marriage is in trouble, her profession has ended, and she has secluded herself from the majority of her family. Paul will have to decide whether he wants to repair his connection with Neil, but that is not my duty. I did nothing wrong in this circumstance, other than defend myself from someone who was actively attempting to destroy my career. If you've been following this narrative from the beginning, you've probably learned that dishonest people will eventually expose themselves if given enough rope. Noah could have had a fantastic marketing career if she had concentrated on developing her own abilities and reputation rather than attempting to undermine mine. I never had to establish my innocence or defend my reputation because my work and character spoke for themselves. Noah, on the other hand, had to keep up an increasingly sophisticated web of lies, which eventually broke under its own weight. Neil and I begin our new chapter next month in a city where no one knows our tale. We're both grateful for the chance to move forward without the weight of family strife hanging over us. Sometimes the greatest solution is to simply walk away and let toxic people deal with the disaster they've caused. My girlfriend chose her squad over me. Months later, the squad fell apart, and she demanded I come back. I gave her 30 seconds to leave. I thought relationships were meant for two people, but mine always felt like it came with 4 extra. My 27-year-old self had been with Jennifer, 25, for nearly 2 years, and while I once believed we had something special, lately it seemed like I was dating her entire squad instead of just her. We moved in together 6 months ago, split the bills and chores evenly, and tried to build a life. But with Linnea, Cassian, Murray, and Dorian constantly in the picture, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd become just another name on her group chat. And then came the last straw. For the last time, my 27-year-old male girlfriend and 25-year-old female chose her friendship over our relationship. I am done. I don't know where to begin with this mess. I've been with Jennifer for nearly 2 years, and I felt we had something special. We moved in together 6 months ago and split everything, even the housework, evenly. But now, I feel like I'm dating 5 individuals rather than one. Here is the thing. Jennifer has a close circle of friends, including Linnea, Cassian, Murray, and Dorian. They name themselves the squad without irony, and they basically do everything together. Group discussions are active 24 hours a day, with matching Halloween costumes. At first I thought it was nice that she had such close pals. Now I'm wondering if I'm even in a relationship, or if he's simply paying half the rent. The breaking point occurred last weekend. Our 2-year anniversary was approaching, and I had planned the entire evening. We made reservations at the venue where we had our first actual date. I got tickets to see the band she's been obsessed with. Nothing outrageously pricey, but thoughtful items. I discovered her in the living room, looking through Instagram stories about her friends' weekend adventures. "Hey, so I've got something special planned for our anniversary next Saturday," I said as I sat down next to her. She looked up from her phone and I swear her expression was as if I had informed her someone had died. "Oh." She slowly laid the phone down. "Oh babe, that's the same night as Murray's birthday pregame. You know I can't miss that." My stomach dropped slightly, but I tried to seem calm. "Well, what if you asked them if you could reschedule for Friday night or Sunday?" She was already shaking her head before I finished speaking. No, you don't understand. Murray specifically planned it for Saturday because it's literally the only night everyone can make it. Cassian's got that big work conference starting Sunday. And Linnea's been so stressed with her new job that she really needs this, and Dorian just broke up with that girl he was seeing, so he needs us right now too. I observed her expression as she spoke, and she became more passionate, as if she was warming up for her argument. "We really need this night, Rowan. The group hasn't been together properly in weeks." "But it's our anniversary," I protested, and I hated how little my voice sounded. "This only happens once a year. You can see your friends literally any other time." That was when her entire demeanor shifted. She sat back, crossed her arms, and gave me the look that suggested I was being completely unreasonable. "Love can wait, but friendship can't. They were here before you, and they'll be here after." I was simply staring at her. The words struck me like a physical blow. They'll be here after. Not if something happens to us, not, God forbid, that we break up. But a casual matter-of-fact after, as if our breakup had already been scheduled between next month's group vacation and Linnea's birthday party. Despite everything we've accomplished together, I'm still just a transitory fixture that can be rescheduled around brunch arrangements. This is not the first time either. Instead of celebrating my master's graduation, she attended Cassian's housewarming celebration. My brother's wedding was last month, and she was too fatigued from a 3-day celebration with the squad to come as my +1. Jennifer was unable to visit my mother while she was in the hospital for surgery because it interfered with their weekly game night. However, she expects me to drop everything when she wants something. Last month she called me at 2 a.m. to pick her up from a dive bar across town since Dorian was too drunk to drive safely. When I arrived, she barely greeted me and continued taking selfies with everyone while I stood there like an Uber driver, then spent the entire journey home discussing the drama between Linnea and some man from the pub. The worst aspect is how she discusses our connection with them. I overheard her on the phone with Mireille last week, talking about how I'm going through a jealous period and need to learn to share her time more effectively, as if I were an insecure teenager rather than her partner, who simply wants to feel like a priority at times. I tried to talk to her about balance and how relationships need to be nurtured. She always swears to do better, but then makes arrangements that exclude me. When I bring out the pattern, she accuses me of attempting to distance her from her pals. There is no victory. I'm writing from a coffee shop since I couldn't tolerate being in our apartment any longer. I spent the entire morning looking at places online. I found a decent one-bedroom around 20 minutes away that I can afford on my own. The leasing application is currently in my email drafts. I adore her, but I can't keep ranking 6th in my own relationship. My pals believe I should provide her an ultimatum, but honestly, I'm tired of begging people to spend time with me. Is it unreasonable to expect your girlfriend to occasionally want to be your girlfriend? Edit. Reading all of these answers has been very eye-opening. To everyone who has asked why I haven't just stopped it, you are correct. I keep hope she will recognize what she is doing, but she has made it clear where her priorities lie. I'm going to submit the rental application when I get home. Update 1. The original post blew up far more than I imagined. Thank you for all your help and suggestions. I wish I could say this story ended happily, with us working things out, but you'll see. So I submitted the rental application the same day. I got authorized within 48 hours, which felt like a sign. I spent the next week quietly transferring my belongings while Jennifer was out with the squad, which was convenient because it happened almost every day. By the time she recognized something was wrong, I had already relocated almost 80% of my belongings. She returned home at midnight on Thursday night, having allegedly gone to a new rooftop bar that Dorian wanted to visit, and noticed that my gaming equipment was missing. I heard her yell my name from the living room, her voice rising with each room she examined. Rowan, what the hell is going on here? Where's all your stuff? She found me in our bedroom, packing up the remainder of my clothes. She remained at the doorway for a moment, inspecting the room as if she were taking inventory of what was missing. Are you moving out? Her voice cracked slightly with the last word. I gave her the letter I had written. I tried to make it simple and honest, saying that I needed to be with someone who wanted to prioritize our relationship, and that I couldn't continue to feel like an afterthought in her life. She read it quickly, then gradually, her eyes widening. She gazed up at me as if I were a stranger. You're seriously leaving me because I have friends? Because I won't ditch the people who have been there for me for years? I sat down on the edge of the bed, tired. Jennifer, it's not about you having friends. Then what is it about? She demanded, waving the letter. Because this whole thing reads like you want me to choose between you and everyone I care about. I want you to care about me too, I added quietly. I want to feel like I matter to you. Like our relationship matters. She looked at me as if I had suggested something insane. Of course you matter, but I can't just abandon my friends every time you want attention. I felt something twist in my chest. Jennifer, I asked you to spend one evening with me for our anniversary one, and I explained why. That night was important, more important than us. She flung her hands up. This is ridiculous, Rowan. You're throwing away 2 years because you can't handle me having a social life. You knew who I was when we started dating. I looked at her, really looked at her, and understood she did not comprehend. In her opinion, I was the problem. I was being unreasonable. I thought I knew who you were, I replied, rising up and shutting the bag. I thought you were someone who wanted to build something with me. I do want to build something with you, but not if it means cutting off everyone else in my life. I'm not asking you to cut them off. I'm asking you to make space for me too. But she was already shaking her head, and I could tell from her eyes that we were going in circles. She interpreted this as me being domineering. I viewed it as fundamental relationship upkeep. There was no middle ground that we both wanted to discover. After another 20 minutes of repeating the same arguments, I raised my hands. I'm done, Jennifer. I'm done arguing about this. Done arguing or done with us? Both. The finality in my speech appeared to strike her. Then her entire posture altered, as if she knew this wasn't just a conflict we'd gotten through. That's when things turned weird. She began following me throughout the apartment, detailing everything we'd done together and the memories we'd created. Even so, every other phrase mentioned her friends. Remember when we went to that concert and ran into Linnea and Cassian? What about the time we cooked dinner for the whole squad? It was as if she couldn't even imagine moments that were only about us. I promised her I'd return for the remainder of my belongings over the weekend when she was at Murray's pool party, because of course, there was one. I left my key on the kitchen counter and walked out. But obviously leaving was not enough for her. Saturday morning, I'm in my new place, finally feeling like I can breathe again, when my phone starts acting up. Jennifer is phoning non-stop and sending paragraph-long texts about how we need to discuss things out like grown-ups. When I didn't respond, she started having the squad message me. Linnea sent me a long text about Jennifer's devastation and how I'm splitting up the family. Dorian called me immature for leaving instead of working things out. Cassian took a fair approach and suggested that we all meet to discuss matters. Even Murray, with whom I'd had maybe 10 talks in 2 years, felt entitled to tell me I was making a mistake. The messages became increasingly hostile as the day progressed. Things like, "You're going to regret this, and Jennifer deserves better anyway." By Sunday evening, they were labeling me emotionally abusive for leaving her without notice, despite the letter I'd written explaining everything. Then Monday night occurred. I arrived home from work to see all 5 of them standing outside my new building. Jennifer was in the front, with the squad arranged behind her like an intervention team. As soon as she saw me, she began talking so loudly that neighbors looked out their windows. "We need to settle this right now. You don't get to just disappear and ignore everyone. We're all adults here." I assured them that there was nothing to settle. I'd made a decision. I had given my reasoning, and I was not changing my mind. That's when Dorian came forward with this gem. "Dude, you're being a selfish piece of, do you know how much you're hurting her? How much you're hurting all of us?" All of them. I questioned what I had done to hurt people I barely knew. Apparently by dating Jennifer, I had become a part of their family system, and leaving her meant abandoning all of them. You could only image my expression while listening to this pure rubbish. It was the most codependent thing I had ever heard. The entire situation seemed strange. Chloe was crying. Cassian kept attempting to mediate. Murray was recording everything on her phone. For what? I have no idea. Jennifer just stood there nodding, as if this were all totally typical behavior. I gave them exactly 30 seconds to depart my home before calling building security. When they didn't move and kept asking me to figure things out like an adult, I went inside and did just that. Security appeared and requested them to leave, which they did, but not before Jennifer yelled that it wasn't over. It was 3 weeks ago. The calls and texts have now ceased, but I continue to receive messages from random numbers, most likely from people using someone else's phone. I doubt they would try to come to my building again. Building management is already aware of their presence. I don't regret leaving, but I'm amazed at how insane things became. Who takes their complete friend group to abuse their ex? What type of mature behavior is that? Update 2. Back with another update. I honestly didn't expect to be posting more about this subject, but it appears that life has a sense of humor. First and foremost, everything is going great on my end. The new apartment is amazing. Work has been busy but fulfilling, and I've been reconnecting with pals I'd neglected over the Jennifer years. It turns out that when you don't spend every weekend as the designated driver for someone else's social circle, you have more time for your own connections. Who knew? The true tragedy here, however, is what has happened to Jennifer and the infamous squad. My friend Callista works with Cassian, and it appears like the group dynamics have shifted. Remember how I said Cassian was becoming serious with his girlfriend Callista? Well, they got engaged 2 weeks ago. Callista has been vocal about her belief that the entire group setup is immature, and she has pushed Cassian to set better boundaries. Cassian, according to Callista, has been gradually withdrawing from the constant group activities, missing the weekly hangouts, responding to the group chat less frequently, and focusing on his romance instead. Sounds familiar? Jennifer appeared to lose it when Cassian stated he couldn't make their yearly weekend trip to the beach house since he and Callista had already booked a trip to see her parents. "You're becoming just like Rowan," she purportedly said, because God forbid that someone prioritizes their romantic relationship over weekend beach vacations. But things get better. Linnea received a raise at work that requires her to relocate to Portland. She's been attempting to schedule virtual hangouts and visits, but Jennifer's been icy about it all. Apparently she made a remark about how true friends do not leave the group for professional chances. Linnea naturally feels upset by this reaction to what should be positive news. Then there's the Murray/Dorian dilemma. I never got the complete story while dating Jennifer, but apparently they've had an on and off relationship for years that everyone pretends isn't occurring. It's happening again, but this time they're serious enough to want to date rather than just hook up at group activities. Jennifer is not handling this well because it alters the group dynamic, and she is concerned about what would happen if they split apart. So let me get this straight. When I complained about being deprioritized, I was being controlling and selfish. But now, when she feels devalued by her friends, it's a tragedy, and everyone abandons her. The best thing, according to Callista's girlfriend, who is pals with her, is that Jennifer has been going around telling everyone that everyone is pulling a Rowan on her. Like wanting to mature and form adult relationships is some sort of betrayal epidemic that I initiated. I don't think she realizes that no one is taking her seriously anymore. Meanwhile, I'm having real fun for the first time in months. I went to a concert last weekend with some college pals I hadn't seen in forever. No group coordination is necessary. Nobody insisted on taking an Instagram snapshot every 5 minutes, and I wasn't forced to leave early because someone required emotional support for their newest drama. It was revolutionary. I've also been seeing somebody new. Nothing serious yet, but Alara is pleasant. She has close friends, but she recognizes that relationships require one-on-one time to develop. Isn't this a novel concept? We had supper Friday night, just the two of us, and she didn't look at her phone once. It didn't occur to me how odd that was till later. But this is when things become really fascinating. 3 days earlier, I received an SMS from Jennifer. This is the first direct interaction since the apartment building confrontation. Hey, I know things ended badly between us, but I've been doing a lot of thinking. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime. I feel like we both said things we didn't mean. What the hell? I just sat there staring at my phone for about a minute, after months of pure stillness, and now this. It felt like being sucker punched out of nowhere. I did not react right away, but she sent another one yesterday. I know I made mistakes. I was young and didn't understand how to balance everything, but I've been learning and growing, and I think we could try again if you're open to it. I showed Callista the texts, and he simply chuckled. Jennifer apparently received word that I've been doing well, that I'm seeing someone new, and that I appear to be truly happier. Callista believes she is discovering that having a loyal lover was not such a bad thing after all. However, the timing is quite significant, as her buddy group is gradually evolving, and she is confronted with the truth that people grow up, and their priorities shift. She has suddenly expressed a desire to reconsider our relationship. Where was all this learning and growing as I begged her to understand my emotions for 2 years? I am not replying to your mails. I do not owe her a coffee date or the opportunity to explain herself. I spent 2 years trying to convince her to understand what I needed from a partnership, but she constantly dismissed those demands. I'm not interested in being her fallback plan now that her major social structure is shifting. Edit. Some folks are wondering if I believe she has truly changed, or if this is purely for convenience. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Even if she has gained some knowledge about relationships, I have moved on. I'm creating something fresh with someone who already knows what a partnership looks like. Why would I go backwards? Final update. This is probably my final article regarding the subject, but I wanted to relate how things ended because so many of you have been following along. The Jennifer text messages persisted for about a week following my previous update. Nothing forceful or manipulative, rather she was looking for the ideal combination of words to elicit a response from me. Some highlights. I finally understand what you meant about balance. I see it now. The group isn't the same anymore. I think I was using everyone to avoid dealing with real intimacy. I miss talking to you, not even about getting back together, just talking. The last one almost got me. We used to have amazing chats, particularly early in our relationship. But I recalled myself that good discussion does not imply good relationship, and I remained mute. Things came to a head last Tuesday. Alara and I were having dinner at this downtown Italian restaurant when I noticed Jennifer, Dorian and Mireille sitting at a corner table. Cassian and Linnea were noticeably absent. Cassian was apparently attending a couple's event with his fiancée, while Linnea was already in Portland settling into her new life. Jennifer noticed me before I could recommend we go. Our gazes met across the restaurant, and I could see her considering whether to come over. Alara observed my tenseness and asked whether everything was fine. I briefly stated the problem. She was aware of my ex's attempts to contact me, but she was unaware of the entire extent of the situation. To her credit, Jennifer did not cause a scene. She gave me a little wave before appearing to engage in an animated conversation with Dorian and Mireille. I thought that was the end of it. However, when Alara and I were leaving, Jennifer approached us near the exit. Rowan, hey, I don't want to interrupt your evening, but could I talk to you for just a minute? Alara clasped my hand and said she'd wait by the car. Probably the most gracious manner anyone has ever approached meeting their partner's ex. Jennifer looked different. Perhaps you're tired, or simply getting older. She started talking swiftly, as if she had practiced it. I know you haven't been responding to my messages, and I understand why. I just wanted to say that you were right about everything. About the balance, about priorities, about what a real relationship should look like. I see Cassian with Callista, and I watch how they support each other, and I realize I never did that with you. I told her I appreciated her saying that, but it didn't change anything between us. I know I'm not asking for another chance. I just needed you to know that I understand now. And I'm sorry, really, genuinely sorry for how I treated you, and how I reacted when you left. It was the first time she'd apologized without qualification or explanation. She looked over to Alara in the parking lot, and smiled sadly. She seems lovely. I hope she appreciates what she has. And that was all. She returned to her table. I went to my car, and Alara inquired if I was all right. I realized I really was. The ironic conclusion to all of this. I learned from Callista that the squad is nearly finished. Cassian is completely dedicated to his new life with Callista, and he seldom speaks to the gang anymore. Linnea adores Portland and has found acquaintances through work. Murray and Dorian are now dating, but it appears that they want to get away from the group dynamic that has complicated their lives for so long. Jennifer has been trying to keep the group together by organizing activities and sending wistful messages about the good times. However, you cannot force people to continue in a dynamic that they have outgrown. She is learning what I tried to tell her months ago. That all partnerships involve reciprocal investment and understanding. When people believe they cannot be real or pursue their own growth, they leave. As for me and Alara, things are going well. She met some of my friends last weekend, and everything went smoothly. Nobody felt they had to perform or compete for attention. Just grown-ups hanging around and getting to know one another. She's mentioned taking a weekend trip together next month, just the two of us. The fact that this appears normal and exciting rather than selfish or threatening reveals everything I need to know about the distinction between healthy and unhealthy relationship patterns. I don't have any nasty wishes for Jennifer. I hope she can figure out how to make connections without jeopardizing other essential relationships. But I'm pleased I had the fortitude to leave when I did. Sometimes the finest thing you can do for yourself is refuse to accept being treated as an option. My sister-in-law tried to ban my adopted daughter from the party, but 32 relatives fought back, and she was thrown out in shame. The text lit my screen like a match. Don't bring that outsider. I looked at my 11-year-old clutching a sparkly outfit and a handmade card, and realized tonight wouldn't be about an engagement, it would be about who gets to decide what family means. I tried to steady my breath, but when I glanced back at Sophie, beaming with pride over her carefully wrapped gift, I knew I had to protect that light at all costs. Sophie, my 11-year-old daughter, was in the kitchen, showing me her clothing. I am excited about my sister's engagement celebration tomorrow. We had adopted her 4 months before, and she was still in the trying to prove herself stage, so family events were quite important to her. She had just finished wrapping the engaged couple's gift when my phone rang. It was Vanessa, my sister-in-law. Don't bring that outsider to the engagement party. This is for real family only, not some random charity case you picked up to feel good about yourselves. I looked at the message with disdain. Sophie looked up from the phone before I could move. That's about me. Her lower lip trembled. I tried to turn the phone, but she had already noticed it. I'm an outsider. She was now sniffling in between phrases. A charity case? The tears started rolling. I'm not real family. She was practically in tears. But everyone hugged me at Christmas. They do love you. I tried so hard to be good for you. Now she was weeping. I saved for 3 weeks for their present. I thought if I got them something nice. She wouldn't finish. Am I going back to foster care? That devastated me. I drew her into a massive mom embrace. Listen to me. You are never going back. We are going to that party. Vanessa doesn't get to decide whose family. But she said I don't match. Then we'll make you match so perfectly she can't say a word. I removed the tears. Do you want to wear the sparkly outfit you chose? Her eyes brightened up slightly. The one with rainbows. Every single rainbow. I texted the screenshot to my husband. He rushed downstairs, and his jaw tightened. He knelt beside Sophie. Vanessa said that about you? She nodded. Well, Vanessa's about to learn what happens when you mess with our daughter. Sophie's eyes widened as she heard the term, daughter. My phone rang. Go get your sparkly outfit, we're adding to it. My sister Julia is getting married. Mom just forwarded me Vanessa's text. I'm livid, put me on speaker. I did, in fact. Sophie, honey, I need you at my party. In fact, I have a special job. You're going to help me with something secret. Sophie smiled. Really? Really? And wear your best outfit. Vanessa texted Sophie again as she tried on her outfit. Just confirming you received my message. I assume she will not be there. I did not react. My mother-in-law called though. I saw Vanessa's texts. That woman married my son, but she's never been family like Sophie is. She heard. Grandma said I'm family. Baby, you've been family since day one. That's when my teenage nephew, Vanessa's own son, emailed me. Mom's being weird about Sophie. I'm wearing a matching sparkly bow tie tomorrow. Vanessa's own kids were rebelling. We quickly went shopping for accessories such as glittery platform shoes, diamond-shaped hair accessories, and a rhinestone-encrusted pocketbook. Is this too much? Sophie inquired. It's perfect. Vanessa's going to lose her mind, I told her. She smiled. Good. Sophie prepared another gift that evening, a large handcrafted card with congratulations and stickers for everyone in the family. Vanessa contacted my husband, but we let the message go to voicemail. I'm not trying to be mean, but tomorrow is about Julia, not your little charity project. I'm thinking of Julia's happiness. The family group chat erupted when Julia declared, everyone wear something sparkly tomorrow, even if it's just a sock to match Sophie. Vanessa quickly texted the group. Julia said, that's not necessary. Sophie practiced walking in her platforms, saying, yes, it is. What if Vanessa blocks the door? Then we go through her, my husband responded. But what if? No what ifs, you belong there. Sophie changed into her full attire the following morning. Do I look like I belong? You look like you own the place. In the car, she hugged both gifts. Mom, what if nobody else wore sparkles? They will. What if Vanessa says something mean? Then everyone will see exactly who she is. We arrived at the venue. Vanessa was stationed at the entrance, like a guard. Her countenance changed from confident to volcanic as she saw Sophie in her sparkling glory. But before she could say anything, Julia came through the door in her dress. Sophie, my special helper. She raced over and scooped Sophie up. You look perfect. Come on, we have work to do. Vanessa's mouth opened, but Julia had already whisked Sophie inside. The entire family was there, all dressed sparkly, grandparents in glitter bow ties, aunts in glitter scarves, and Vanessa's own children in rhinestone accessories, the newest addition of our family. Vanessa stood motionless as her own children ran to embrace Sophie. We love your outfit. You look like a disco ball, her teenage son exclaimed. This is our cousin Sophie, everyone. Julia raised her glass while toasting. Before we celebrate, I need my special helper. She drew Sophie up next her. This amazing girl joined our family 6 months ago and made it complete. Sophie, will you be my flower girl? The entire venue erupted. Sophie's hands rushed to her mouth. Vanessa's face was purple. Julia nearly burst into tears as Sophie handed her the family card. It's perfect, Julia said. This is going in our wedding album. Vanessa tried to dispute the mess, but Julia's fiancé yelled, this is what family does. Vanessa stood up, documents in hand, and began moving to the center of the room. She cleared her throat aggressively. Vanessa raised her arm high, clutching a stack of papers in her fist. Everyone needs to hear this. The entire room became silent, and every single guest turned to look at her. Sophie's small hand gripped mine so hard that I felt she'd break my fingers. I have documentation here about adoption fraud that proves this child does not belong in our family. Vanessa waved the papers around as if they were winning lottery tickets. People began whispering and looking at us and Vanessa. My heart was racing, but before I could react, Julia was storming across the room in her engagement gown. She reached Vanessa in approximately 3 seconds and pulled the papers right out of her grasp. The sound of paper tearing filled the still room as Julia ripped them apart without glancing at what they stated. Anyone who doesn't support all members of this family can leave right now. Julia hurled the ripped pieces into the air, which fluttered down like confetti. Vanessa's face turned purple, and she began yelling about evidence, legal guardians, and the fact that we were not Sophie's biological parents. My husband stepped forward from behind me, straight up to Vanessa. "You need to leave this party immediately." His voice was calm, but his hands were quivering with rage. Vanessa started shrieking that she had proof and that everyone should know the truth about our unlawful adoption. Marcus eventually pushed past the mob, as if he wanted to dissolve into the floor. "Vanessa, please, let's just go." He reached for her arm, but she wrenched it away, yelling about attorneys and papers. Marcus turned to face everyone, his cheeks flaming red. "I'm so sorry about this." He reached for Vanessa's elbow to help her to the exit, but she pushed him back. Claire Monroe, the venue manager, appeared with 2 security guards right behind her. She walked up to Vanessa with a professional smile that did not reach her eyes. "Ma'am, you're disrupting this event, and I need you to leave voluntarily within the next 2 minutes, or these gentlemen will escort you out." Vanessa looked at the security guards, then back at Claire, but remained standing there as if she were rooted to the floor. Vanessa's adolescent son stood up from his seat. "I'm staying at the party with my cousin Sophie." He marched right by his mother and hugged Sophie in a massive hug. His younger siblings rose up and ran over to join the hug, leaving Vanessa standing alone at the exit. My mother-in-law rose from her seat and gently approached Vanessa. She came to a halt directly in front of her and spoke just loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I'm ashamed of your behavior. Sophie has been my granddaughter for 6 months, and your prejudice won't change that." Vanessa's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. She grabbed her purse and stomped towards the door. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer about this illegal adoption." She slammed the door so furiously that the entire room shook. Marcus remained behind, shoulders down and face still crimson. "I'll handle my wife, I promise." He looked at me, then Sophie. "I'm so sorry." Julia took the microphone from the DJ stand. "All right everyone, it's time for my special flower girl to help me cut the celebration cake." She held out her hand to Sophie. "Come up here where everyone can see you." Sophie stared at me, and I agreed. So she walked up to the stage, where Julia was waiting. Sophie stood next to Julia by the large cake, and the entire audience began to shout and cheer. People were taking pictures and complimenting Sophie on how beautiful she looked in her glittery costume. Sophie appeared to be about to collapse after the cake cutting, so I brought her to the venue's prep area. She burst into sobs as soon as we entered and locked the door. Her entire body shook as she cried into my shirt. "Can Aunt Vanessa really take me away?" She could barely speak between sobbing. "What if she has real papers? What if the adoption wasn't done right?" I hugged her as tightly as I could without injuring her. "Listen to me, baby. Vanessa has absolutely no power over our family. The adoption is completely legal and final. No one can take you away from us." She started crying and asking what if questions about lawyers, courts and foster care. I simply kept hugging her and told her over and over that she was ours forever, and Vanessa couldn't change that. Her glittery dress was disheveled from how tightly she pressed against me, but I didn't mind. We waited in the prep room for what seemed like an eternity while she cried out her concern over what had just happened. I could hear the celebration outside, but all that mattered was that Sophie knew she was safe and loved, and she would never go. Julia entered the prep room, holding a little silver box that gleamed under the lights. She knelt next to Sophie and opened it, revealing a crystal tiara with tiny rhinestone flowers. Without saying anything, she carefully placed it on Sophie's head and adjusted it to suit exactly with her dazzling attire. Sophie's eyes widened as she touched the tiara with shaky fingers, and Julia drew her into a lengthy hug. I saw them hugging each other as the celebration music played softly through the walls. Julia mentioned something about family being about choosing to love one another, and Sophie nodded into her shoulder. Marcus stepped inside after hearing a knock on the door, his hands in his pockets. He requested if he could talk to us alone, and despite the fact that the room was chilly, I could see sweat on his forehead. Julia gave Sophie one last embrace before telling her to go show everyone her new tiara. Sophie walked slowly out, still stroking the gems on her head, as if she couldn't believe they were real. Marcus slammed the door behind her and leaned against it, his shoulders slumping forward. He began telling how Vanessa had been trying to adopt for 2 years without luck, and how seeing us with Sophie made her insanely envious. His voice cracked as he admitted he should have stopped her sooner, but he hoped she would settle down on her own. I wanted to be angry with him, but he looked so miserable standing there, apologizing over and over. We returned to the celebration, where Sophie was besieged by relatives who wanted to touch her tiara and tell her how beautiful she looked. Sophie's smile grew larger as the photographer continued to pull her apart for photos with various family members. Grandma made careful to capture a photo with just the two of them wearing identical glittery accessories. Vanessa's children remained close to Sophie the entire time, as if they were sheltering her from their absent mother. Sophie wore her tiara throughout the party, even as we ate cake and danced. Sophie stood in our bedroom doorway, clutching her beloved bear, and begged if she could sleep with us. She climbed into the center of our bed and curled up small between us, pressing her back into my chest. My husband reached over and grabbed her hand as she questioned Vanessa's ability to take her away. We spent hours in the dark assuring her she was stuck with us for good, and that no one could change it. She fell asleep holding both of our hands, but awoke twice crying from nightmares of attorneys and courts. We had to repeat the assurances and embracing until she calmed down enough to sleep again. The next morning, as I was making breakfast, my phone rang and it was Marcus, who sounded worried. He stated that Vanessa had spent the entire night on her laptop researching adoption rules and printed out articles regarding contested adoptions. He was trying to divert her, but he wanted us to know she wasn't abandoning her mad scheme. I hung up and quickly called our adoption lawyer, who had handled Sophie's case 6 months before. When I told her about Vanessa, she chuckled and said there was nothing a sister-in-law could do to oppose an already finalized adoption. She offered to prepare a formal letter if necessary, but stated that Vanessa had no legal standing whatsoever. While I was on the phone, our family group chat became inundated with messages from guests at the celebration. Cousins and aunts were posting images of themselves with Sophie, all wearing glittery accessories and expressing their joy that she had joined the family. Someone shared a video of Sophie receiving her tiara, and it quickly garnered thousands of heart emojis and comments about how adorable she was. Vanessa must have seen all of the messages because she started her own group chat, which excluded us and everyone who had defended Sophie. She tried to convince people that we were concealing information about the adoption and that she was concerned about Sophie's background. Only 2 distant cousins answered, and both advised her to drop it and quit causing trouble. Marcus emailed me screenshots of Vanessa's chats, and I could tell she was becoming increasingly frantic with each one. Things appeared to be quieter after 3 days, until Sophie's school counselor called me at work. She claimed Sophie had a panic episode during social studies when the teacher discussed lawyers as part of a government lesson. Sophie began crying and couldn't catch her breath, so they had to take her to the nurse's office. Sophie repeatedly asked the counselor if attorneys could take children away from their parents, and nothing they said calmed her down. I left work right once and found Sophie still in the nurse's office, her eyes red and puffy, her glittery purse gripped in her lap. She threw herself at me the moment I stepped in and refused to let go, even after I tried to sign her out. She spent the entire trip home wondering what would happen if Vanessa hired a lawyer and whether judges could force her to return to foster care. That afternoon, I began calling therapists specializing in adoption trauma and family conflict difficulties. The receptionist at one office stated that they had someone named Evelyn Ma who was fantastic with children and had openings later in the week. I scheduled the first available appointment and jotted down everything that had transpired, so I wouldn't forget anything significant. Sophie spent the remainder of the day following me around the home, as if she was scared I'd disappear if she looked away. While I was in the kitchen cooking Sophie a snack, my phone buzzed with a text from Julia. She stated that she will officially remove Vanessa from the wedding guest list, unless she immediately apologized to Sophie. She'd previously spoken with the venue management about arranging extra security in case Vanessa attempted to crash the wedding. I handed Sophie the message, and her eyes widened as she realized Aunt Julia had chosen her over Vanessa. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang, and there stood Marcus, holding a large bunch of flowers and wearing the most embarrassed expression on his face. He stepped down to Sophie's level and offered her the flowers, apologizing for not stopping his wife sooner. He promised to get Vanessa into counseling, and asked if we could all work together to fix things eventually. Sophie accepted the flowers, but remained pressed against my leg, not ready to fully trust him yet. Marcus stayed for an hour, mainly sitting quietly as Sophie showed him her school projects from across the room. He kept apologizing every few minutes until my husband informed him we had heard him and needed time to process it all. After Marcus left, my mother-in-law called to say she was planning a special supper for everyone who had supported Sophie. She made it plain that Vanessa was not invited, and she wanted Sophie to see how many family members supported her. Sophie's favorite delicacies had already been ordered from 3 different restaurants for the weekend's dinner at her home. That Friday night, we stepped into Grandma's house, which was packed with cousins, aunts, uncles and family friends. Everyone had made Sophie cards expressing how much they appreciated having her in the family. Vanessa's own children had created the largest card coated in glitter with the words, "Best cousin ever," across the front. Sophie sat in the middle of the living room floor, opening card after card while tears streamed down her face. Her teen cousin read it aloud, stating, "Sophie was the coolest addition to their family in years." The smaller children climbed on top of her in a gigantic cousin hug, which evolved into a tickling match. We shot so many images that night that Sophie asked if we may frame each and every card for her bedroom wall. Monday morning I received a certified letter from a law firm that made my blood run cold. Vanessa had issued a formal cease and desist order, saying that we were distancing her children from their mother. She asked us to stop allowing her children to visit Sophie and accused us of turning them against her. Marcus called within minutes after receiving the letter, completely shocked by what his wife had done. He'd already contacted the lawyer to withdraw the entire case, and was headed to the office. 2 hours later, he texted us a copy of the attorney's response to Vanessa. The lawyer had charged her for 3 hours of wasted time, and declined to pursue her matter further. He stated that she had no legal standing to take action against us for a legally adopted child. Vanessa reportedly had a fit in the lawyer's office, and was ordered to leave by building security. Sophie's first visit with Evelyn Ma, the therapist we discovered who specializes in adoption concerns, was on Thursday. I stayed in the waiting room for an hour, trying not to worry about what they were discussing. Sophie smiled as she showed me a paper with breathing exercises Evelyn had given her. She demonstrated the visualization technique in the waiting area by closing her eyes and taking deep breaths. Sophie, according to Evelyn, would do these exercises whenever she was terrified or worried about Vanessa. That night, before bed, I watched Sophie carefully complete each exercise, counting her breaths and visualizing herself in a safe location. She'd chosen our living room on movie night as her visualizing location, with all of us sprawled on the couch together. The next day, we met with Sophie to devise a safety plan in case Vanessa ever approached her. We typed down all of the vital phone numbers on a card for her glittering purse, including mine, Dad's, Grandma's, and even 911. We practiced what she'd say and do if Vanessa showed up at school or elsewhere. Sophie practiced calling for help and ran to the nearest adult, becoming more confident with each practice run. She carried that card in her purse and looked for it every morning before school, like a security blanket. Julia picked up Sophie on Saturday morning for a special girls' day of shopping for flower girl outfits. They visited 5 different boutiques, trying on every style and color combination they could find. Sophie texted me photos of her in each dressing room, whirling in circles and making hilarious faces in formal gowns. They finally discovered the right garment in a small store, white with rainbow ribbon trim that made Sophie squeal with delight. Julia purchased matching shoes and a tiara, as well as a backup dress in case something went wrong with the first. They arrived home with bags of accessories, and Sophie modeled the entire costume for us 3 times. That evening, when I was going through social media, I noticed Vanessa had written a lengthy rant about false families. She did not use our names, but rather talked about adults who adopt children for attention and virtue signaling. The message was definitely about us, describing adoption as a trend for people who wanted to appear good on social media. Within an hour, several family members had denounced the post as harassment and hate speech. Screenshots began to flood our family group chat as everyone expressed their dissatisfaction with Vanessa's behavior. Vanessa deleted the post within 2 hours, or the platform removed it for violating terms. Marcus texted to say he had read the post and was moving into the guest room until Vanessa agreed to get serious assistance. He texted again 20 minutes later, reporting Vanessa was screaming through the guest room door, but he was not backing down this time. Monday morning I dropped Sophie off at school, and she virtually leaped out of the car, clutching a folder full of engagement party photos under her arm. Sophie's teacher called me that afternoon to inform me that she had given a whole presentation about being picked as flower girl during show and tell, replete with images of everyone in their sparkles. Sophie appeared to be more confident recently, standing straighter and speaking louder than she had all year, according to the teacher. That evening we convened a family meeting with our 2 biological children, ages 13 and 15. They sat on either side of Sophie on the couch while we narrated what had occurred to Vanessa. Our oldest sprang up and strode around the room, his fists clenched as he contemplated what his aunt had done. Our 13-year-old daughter put her arms around Sophie and declared that anyone who interfered with her younger sister would have to deal with her as well. Sophie's eyes welled up with tears, but she smiled as her siblings squeezed her between them in a protective sandwich. Vanessa's adolescent son contacted the next day, asking if he could call us via video chat after school. He emerged on screen, weary, and immediately asked if he could still attend the wedding, even though his mother couldn't. We informed him that he was welcome and watched as his shoulders relaxed with relief. He admitted to fighting with Vanessa every day over Sophie's treatment, showing us pictures of their text exchanges in which he called her out for being nasty. He stated that his younger siblings were equally furious with their mother and had been giving her the silent treatment for days. 2 weeks before the wedding, we drove to the location for Sophie's flower girl practice. She wore her real dress and walked down the rehearsal aisle 12 times, growing more confidence with each pass. Claire, the venue manager, observed from the sidelines and took notes on where to place more security on the big day. She showed us the side entrances they'd be watching and described their procedure for dealing with undesirable visitors. Sophie perfected her petal throwing technique, resulting in an orderly trail of rose petals from the back doors to the altar. That night, Marcus called to say Vanessa had finally consented to attend one counseling session, but only to prove she was correct about everything. He seemed cautiously optimistic that a professional could reach her in ways that her family had failed to do. Marcus planned to drive her to the therapist's appointment on Thursday, to ensure she showed up. Sophie put out her painting tools on the dining room table on Saturday morning, announcing that she would be crafting thank you cards for everyone who wore sparkles. She labored for 6 hours straight, making 32 separate cards featuring drawings of each person in their dazzling dress. We spent Sunday afternoon addressing envelopes, with Sophie meticulously writing each name in her best handwriting. She insisted on including extra stickers on the cards for Vanessa's children, who had been extremely supportive. We walked to the mailbox together, and Sophie kissed each envelope before placing it. Marcus texted that evening to report that the therapy session had taken an unexpected turn. Vanessa's therapist had allegedly been extremely straightforward with her, stressing that her behavior may be deemed harassment and that she could face legal ramifications if she continued. Vanessa had gone utterly silent throughout the session and hadn't talked for the entire journey home. Marcus claimed she had shut herself in their bedroom, and he could hear her crying through the door. The following week, Evelyn called to schedule Sophie's usual appointment, noting that she was making excellent improvement. She suggested that we schedule a few family therapy appointments to help everyone process the recent events together. Sophie overheard the talk and quickly requested whether Grandma could attend one of the sessions. She stated that Grandma's encouragement meant everything to her, and she wanted to express her gratitude properly. We booked the family session for the following Tuesday, and my mother-in-law reserved her entire day to attend. The therapy room was tight with all of us crammed onto the couch, but Sophie insisted on sitting directly between me and Grandma. Evelyn led us through a discussion of how the entire scenario affected each family member. When it was Grandma's turn to speak, her voice trembled as she explained how Sophie handled Vanessa's abuse with such grace. She spoke of her pride in Sophie's courage and tenacity, wiping tears from her cheeks. Sophie went to face her grandma and requested quietly whether she might call her Grandma from now on. My mother-in-law cradled Sophie in her arms and sobbed, saying she had been Sophie's grandmother since the beginning. By this point, everyone in the room was in tears. Even Evelyn had to get a tissue from her desk. We spent the rest of the session discussing what family truly means, and how love is determined not by blood or adoption paperwork, but by the decision to show up for one another every day. 5 days before the wedding, Vanessa texted me that she would not be attending or causing any problems. Marcus contacted shortly after to confirm she had booked a spa weekend for the same dates. He sounded relieved when he said that she had finally decided that remaining away was preferable to risking another scene. We spent the remainder of the week having Sophie's flower girl outfit changed one more time and practicing her petal throwing technique in the backyard. She'd throw handfuls of rose petals from her white basket, then dash back to collect them all to attempt again. The wedding rehearsal 2 days later went flawlessly, with Sophie walking down the practice aisle at the venue with a huge smile on her face. The photographer, who had arrived early to investigate spots, kept taking photos of her practicing with her basket. She'd linger at each row of chairs to ensure that everyone received petals, and the photographer caught every moment. Marcus arrived at the rehearsal dinner that night with Vanessa's children, who immediately went up to Sophie with their handmade cards. Marcus approached me and mentioned that Vanessa had assisted them in creating the cards, despite the fact that she was unable to attend. The children surrounded Sophie at her table, showing her all of the glitter and stickers they had used to write "Good Luck Flower Girl" on each one. Sophie insisted on wearing her flower girl attire and the beautiful tiara from the engagement party on the wedding morning. She stepped in front of my bedroom mirror, carefully arranging it, and requested me to snap a photo for her future children. I took approximately 20 photographs while she posed at various angles, making sure the tiara caught the light perfectly. We arrived to the location early so Sophie could practice once more before the guests arrived. Sophie walked down the aisle throughout the wedding, throwing petals with perfect timing and smiling at everyone she passed. Julia hugged Sophie into a deep hug as she approached the altar, before Sophie took her place alongside the other bridesmaids. Sophie stood absolutely motionless throughout the wedding, cradling her empty basket while Julia and her new husband exchanged vows. Marcus stood up during the toasts at the reception and told Sophie how fortunate the family was to have her in their lives. Sophie's face lit up when he referred to her as his niece and expressed his pride in being her uncle. Later, during the dancing, Vanessa's adolescent son approached Sophie and requested a special dance in front of everyone. He exclaimed loudly that she was the best cousin ever, and soon the other kids joined them in this large circle. They were all dancing around Sophie, who was twirling in the center, her tiara shining in the lights. My mother-in-law approached me during a slow song and explained that Vanessa had seen the entire wedding via live stream from her spa. She had not remarked on anything, but she had watched from start to finish, which seemed like progress. Sophie ultimately fell asleep in my arms near the conclusion of the celebration, still wearing her tiara, exhausted by the excitement. Even while she slept, she clutched her flower basket and smiled serenely. Julia approached and whispered that Sophie had made the wedding completely beautiful, and she could not picture it without her. 2 weeks after the wedding, Sophie received a card written in Vanessa's handwriting. Inside, it simply read, "Congratulations on being a beautiful flower girl," with Vanessa's signature at the bottom. Sophie stared at it for a long time before asking whether she may write back to express her gratitude. We helped her write a brief note, and she drew a picture of the entire family, including Vanessa, standing together. Marcus texted later that Vanessa had gotten it and was in tears when she saw the drawing. 3 days later, Sophie approached me with colored pencils and construction paper, asking if she could write a thank you note to Aunt Vanessa for the card. We sat at the kitchen table together as she meticulously penned each phrase in her best handwriting, erasing and rewriting until every letter was flawless. She drew a picture at the bottom of our entire family standing in a line, and she positioned Vanessa next to Marcus, a big smile on her stick figure face. I helped her address the envelope, and we walked to the mailbox where she stood on tiptoes to push it inside. Marcus called me that evening to say Vanessa had received the note, and when she saw the drawing of herself in the family picture, she burst into tears in their kitchen. Marcus visited by our house one afternoon while Sophie was at school to keep us updated on Vanessa's progress. He sat at our kitchen counter, drinking coffee, and told that Vanessa had been going to therapy twice a week since the wedding, and the therapist was helping her work through some profound issues from her own background. Vanessa and Marcus had apparently been attempting to adopt for over 2 years before Sophie arrived, and they had been refused by 3 separate agencies for a variety of reasons that Vanessa took very personally. The therapist explained to Marcus that Vanessa's rage at Sophie was actually envy combined with grief over their own adoption issues, and she was beginning to grasp this now, but she still had a long way to go. Marcus stated that Vanessa wasn't ready to apologize yet, but she was working on herself, which was progress. Sophie's final appointment with Evelyn Ma was the next month, and I drove her to the familiar office for the last time. Sophie virtually jumped into the waiting room, in stark contrast to the terrified teenager who had attended her first consultation months before. Evelyn called us back after the session with a large smile on her face and handed Sophie a certificate she'd designed that said, "Certificate of Bravery," with Sophie's name in beautiful lettering. Evelyn said that Sophie had developed wonderful coping abilities and no longer required regular treatment, but we could always return if something came up. Sophie hugged the certificate the entire way home, and immediately requested tape to place it on her bedroom wall, next to her flower girl tiara from the wedding. 6 months after the disastrous engagement party, my mother-in-law asked us all to a 4th of July family cookout at her place. Marcus had informed us that Vanessa would be there, and it would be the first time we'd all be together since our wedding. We talked to Sophie about it beforehand, and she agreed to go, so we loaded up the car with potato salad and drove over. Vanessa was already present when we arrived, sitting peacefully at a picnic table in the corner of the yard. When we stepped in, she looked up but didn't say anything, just gave us a tiny nod before returning to her drink. Sophie remained close to me at first, but relaxed as Vanessa did not approach or say anything harsh. The kids all played together in the sprinkler while the grown-ups grilled burgers, and it was almost typical, except Vanessa and I kept our distance from each other. She departed early without saying goodbye, but Marcus later stated that simply turning up and not making problems was significant development. Sophie's teacher called in September to inform me that she had received the school's citizenship award for an essay on what family means. The ceremony was held the next Friday morning in the gymnasium, and I immediately began messaging everyone about it. My mother-in-law replied she wouldn't miss it for anything. Julia rescheduled a work meeting to be there, and Marcus even took the morning off to attend. Except for Vanessa, the entire family arrived, occupying an entire row of folding seats in the gymnasium. When Sophie's name was called, she came up to the stage and read her essay aloud to the audience, discussing how family is more than blood, but also about the people who choose to love you every day. I cried. Julia cried. Even my spouse wiped his eyes. Marcus had his phone out, capturing the entire incident, and I noticed him texting something shortly after Sophie ended. Later that evening, Vanessa texted me that she had viewed the video Marcus had given and that Sophie's essay was lovely. Marcus texted me separately, saying that was the first time Vanessa had spoken anything openly nice about Sophie, and he saw it as a significant step forward in her therapy. Christmas arrived, and we were hosting the family event at our home. Vanessa and Marcus arrived with presents, and I saw Vanessa take a wrapped box from her bag and walk over to Sophie, who was seated by the tree. She handed it to Sophie with a simple, "This is for you," and went to help in the kitchen. Sophie carefully unwrapped it to discover a sparkly picture frame with a note inside that read, "For your favorite family photo." Sophie dashed to her room and returned with the photo from the engagement party, the one where she's wearing her full sparkle outfit surrounded by the entire family, and carefully placed it in the frame. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I helped Sophie hang the framed portrait on her bedroom wall, next to her flower girl tiara and certificate of bravery. Standing there, staring at that wall filled in memories from this insane year, I understood how much we'd all evolved and grown as a result of the entire experience.